Hey everyone, this is Mark Ryan coming at you with another live stream. This one, the last one was 2 hours long, which is crazy. Normally, I'm not that long winded, but hey, you get me behind a mic, and sometimes I'll just never stop talking. And so let's read, I guess, the comment that on the live stream that got posted ahead of time. We've got Nicholas, Proclaimer of Messiah, who says Dr. White's reasoning didn't seem to consider that God is trustworthy, such that we need not resort to sin out of fear. He seemed to suggest it is a sinful vote, but one to which we must fearfully resort. And so, really, this video is focusing a lot on Dr. James White. On X, he came out this week, a few days ago, saying, hey, he's going to vote for Donald Trump, and Christians really should vote for Donald Trump. Why? Because, hey, that's what he's doing, right? So you should probably do what he's doing. So we're going to talk about that because that just gets my mind really, really going, in every direction, really. And anytime that you talk about the elections, hey, it gets polarizing. Everyone has their opinion. And there's a lot of wrong opinions out there for sure. But before that, I want to talk a little bit about Grok 2. It came out, 2 weeks ago or so. It's still in beta stage. And so if you sign up for X, which I'm finally on X now, by the way, I have 2 followers. Yay. But Grok 2 came out. It's an AI image generated. It generated the 2 images that are on the thumbnail. You can say to Grok 2, hey, make an image of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump duking it out, fighting boxing, doing whatever. It'll generate it like that. Make an image of Donald Trump boxing Karl Marx. It'll make that image and it'll make it maybe 5 seconds or so or less, which is really just fascinating that AI can do that right now. I told Grok to, hey, make an image of Dr. James White and Karl Marx boxing or fighting, duking it out. But it's not that smart yet. It didn't know who James White is. And so I would think, hey, wait for Grok 3. And once Grok 3 comes out, and it'll probably come out December, January, Grok 3, I imagine, will be able to make a thumbnail like that, just like that, of fill in the blank, of people with lesser name ID. Because right now, Grok 2 has it where it can do that with people of higher name ID, Karl Marx, George Washington, Trump, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden. It recognizes people with more name ID. Give it some time, and it'll do less name ID for you, which is pretty fascinating. I told it, hey, take my profile picture, which is the Montana Viking picture, and turn it into a cartoon image for me. And it posted a picture of a girl. So it didn't have that down. But then if I explain, hey, make an image of a Viking from Montana with a baseball cap and sunglasses, it made that image just like that. And they were pretty good images. Didn't look as good as me, but looked pretty good. So, again, keep your eyes out for that because that's going to be pretty revolutionary. And right now, it just makes really good images just like that. Give it some time and it will get exponentially better, and it'll be able to make videos, very short videos that are very, very good as well. Chat GPT 5 is coming out as well, which is going to be very advanced. But we won't go there yet. I want to talk about the elections a little bit and what Dr. James White said about the elections and voting for Trump. Get into just my thoughts on the elections, who will win, who's the favorite to win today. Put that in the live stream chat or the comment section. If we had to guess today who the favorite, I think the favorite today would be Kamala Harris. Honestly, why there's so much of an uphill battle that Republicans are up against with Democrats right now. Here's one to think about, just one. And that's besides they have the media, they have Hollywood, they have uh, just a lot of culture in their bag, in their corner, and so you're fighting against that. But then also, since 2020, you have 20 million boomers who passed away. They're gone. They're not voting. And if they are voting, they're voting Democrat, right? So you have 20 million boomers gone, and the bulk of them would be conservative, would be Republicans, and would have more of a Christian worldview as well. Um, but then beyond that, you have 20 million, I guess it'd be Gen Z, 20 million of the youth who are now, they weren't voting age in 2020, but now they're voting age in 2024. And they're going to be overwhelmingly liberal and Democrat. And Trump's doing better with the youth vote, but it's still going to be a net positive between both those groups of Democrats there. Now you spread that over 50 states, and it's probably growing faster in California and New York and stuff than in your other states. But hey, that's a pretty big deal, I would think. James Irvin says, hey, Trump will probably get 300 electoral college votes. In this day and age, that's a landslide. And I would be, it's possible. Today, no one really knows who's going to win it. And if the day after, hey, it's Fight Laugh, is that Fight Laugh Feast? We got someone from, with the thumbnail at least, from Fight Laugh Feast, which is great. I want to talk to a bunch of theonomists. That'd be great. Let me post a link. If anyone wants to chat, hey, you're welcome to come and chat today, especially about theonomy, because that's probably going to be the focus. Definitely going to be the focus today. And now I can't even remember what I was saying. But yeah, after President Trump was at that rally and he got shot, bullet grazed his ear, and there's blood everywhere. Just everyone was thinking Trump's got it in the bag. If you followed like crypto markets, they responded explosively positive. Why? Because Trump's a lot more favorable to crypto, and they thought, hey, Trump's elected now; it's as good as done. But the media, which, hey, it's lapdogs for the Democrats. They buried that story within a week. No one's talking about it. If that would have happened to Obama or Clinton or Biden or Harris, they would be talking about that for months. We would never hear the end of it, like, ever. And Time Magazine came out with that picture on Time Magazine and then just memory hold it like it does not exist anymore. Facebook started censoring that. Hey, it's a violent image. We can't show that image. They memory hold it. Mark Zuckerberg came out saying, hey, the Biden-Harris administration really pressured us to censor Americans, right? And we feel bad about that. We never do that again. I feel so guilty about it. Well, he just got done doing it by memory holding that picture of Donald Trump saying fight, fight, fight with his fist raised up. And so, if you think about it a bit, no, there's still tremendous bias going on that's really going to help Democrats. 300 electoral votes, that'd be a landslide. Could have happened. It wouldn't surprise me. Now, if that were to happen, this is my thoughts on how history would play out. I think that if this happens, Republicans would win the Senate, they would win the House. Just book it. They would own all four. They would own all four branches of government. That there's not really four, there's three, right? But they would own the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the presidency, which adds up to four. So they could do pretty much anything. But what would happen? I think that there would be a recession or depression or some crisis that would happen during their administration that make them unpopular. And I think that Democrats would win in a landslide in 2028 and gain power for the House, the Senate, the presidency, and probably pack the Supreme Court. That's what I think would play out. We've got Lawrence Stanley. Hey, great to see you back here again. My fear is that Americans, by and large, are so evil that they will vote for the candidate most likely to enable their evil deeds, such as murdering their offspring. Yeah, and that's if you saw the video that James White posted of women in Florida with tons of them, just a I don't know if it was a gymnasium or what kind of room it was, but just packed with women who are concerned over their reproductive freedom, to murder their offspring. So, there's that as well. But could Trump win this election cycle? Yeah, if Trump were to win, and it's interesting how he's building his coalition this time. If you remember back in 2016, how did Donald Trump build his coalition? It was really going after and courting evangelicals. And he won the evangelical vote even more than George Bush and others before Mitt Romney, John McCain, others before him. He really crushed it with evangelicals there. And now, what is he doing this time? Is he going hardcore after evangelicals? No, he's absolutely not doing that. And no one would say that he's doing that. Will evangelical Christians vote for same sex marriage, abortions, and all that other stuff, right? Um, and did the Republicans come out with a platform? And I talked about this last time, 12 years ago. I remember watching, it was like 10 or 16 Republicans duking it out, right? You had, I think it was Ron Paul, and you had Herman Cain with the 555 plan, and it's very intellectual. Their platform and their ideas were very hashed out. We don't have that anymore. Everything's been dumbed down. It's been dumbed down to, hey, build a wall and kind of bullet points and everything, but a very hashed out platform just seems to me not to exist with Republicans, and certainly with Democrats. Democrats are even more guilty of that. Why? Because Kamala Harris and Tim Walz they flip flopped on a lot of their radical areas that they used to be in support of. I see posts now saying Kamala Harris wants to build a wall. Is that true? Um, but their platform isn't as front and center as it used to be, especially 12 years ago. Well, what do we see now with Donald Trump? He's building a coalition not with evangelicals. They've been left behind. They've been left in the corner. Just go somewhere else. And they have been forsaken for who? For RFK Jr. RFK Jr. has some great ideas, the health crisis and stuff. He speaks a lot of truth on certain issues, but then he is radically left and liberal on other issues. Where if you were a Christian and you saw the things that RFK Jr. still believes in, you'd really cringe. You'd really cringe. But when he's talking about our health crisis, our big pharma crisis as well, the corruption there, hey, he's spot on with a lot of these. And it's weird how politicians aren't really talking about him at all. I remember hearing how Michelle Obama came out with wanting, healthy. Her focus was going to be on healthy kids. And so, hey, kids, get rid of sugar and exercise and all that. Well, the sugar lobby came after Michelle Obama, I guess. Hey, you can't do that. And so it became more of a, I think, exercise and eat healthy meals at school, kind of thing. If I understand that correctly, we need a reformation for moral clarity and basic ethics. Yeah. And that's really what we're talking about today. We're talking about theonomy, and hopefully our theonomic brothers from Fight Laugh Feast Network and such have shown up today, and some folks that just reject it wholeheartedly, right? But then Trump's building a coalition with RFK Jr. with Tulsi Gabbard now. Tulsi used to be Democrat, still a Democrat, and she's probably for killing offspring, murdering offspring. She hasn't shed a lot of democratic values that are anti-Christian values, really. But what what are some positives about Tulsi and RFK? Hey, they really see the authoritarian and the corruption going on in the government and in the deep state and all that. But again, Donald Trump he's making a coalition not of evangelicals, but of ex-Democrats who've been disowned from the Democratic Party. And he's saying that, hey, there's more to come. And we're not going to court evangelicals. We're going to court Democrats and campaign in all these battleground states with RFK Jr., Tulsi, and company there. That's concerning. That's something that people should at least notice. And it's very, very popular for commentators to say, hey, oftentimes Republicans or conservatives, we could say, they will pivot more liberal their second term. And that's going to be true 1,000,000% with Donald Trump. And we haven't even gotten to the James White video yet. Let's start that, and I'll have tons of commentary on it for sure because we haven't even started yet. So here we go.
Issue to start things off. A lot of discussion online right now about voting and the Christian conscience. And very little of it is about voting for the Marxists. If you vote for Marxists, you're voting for your own enslavement. You're voting to enslave. You're voting to close your church, enslave you and your families, your children, your grandchildren, and to enshrine Darwinian secular humanism as the religion of the state. Now, it already is in many ways. But the progress that direction, while accelerating rapidly.
Wait, there we go. I'm going to speed it up a little bit. We can all agree with that. If you are voting for Democrats, you're voting for Marxists who will enslave you and who are authoritarian and want control over every area of your life. They will shut down Christian universities just like that. Just book it. And he's going to talk about, I think Tim Waltz, he's talked about it on X, and how basically in Minnesota now, you cannot be a Christian teacher in Minnesota. You have to quit your job over there if you're going to agree to some of the rules and one of the laws that was passed over there, and some things that you have to do with that. Where if you follow that law, rule, regulation, you're disobeying God is the thing. And maybe we'll bring that story up, but I want to try to get through more of this today. So
this would be an amazing situation to see open Marxists, and I realize there are some benighted folks out there that, oh, they're not Marxists. You don't have any idea what you're talking about. You don't understand what.
I have to remember to unmute my mic. Let me know if it's echoing when he's playing, because maybe I just won't mute my mic. But a while ago, I thought, pre-COVID, yeah, America will never fall to socialism or communism within my lifetime. Now, if you have your eyes open, you're thinking, hey, do we have 2 years left? Do we have till 2030? How many years, not decades, but years do we have left? Is what we're thinking now. Brandon Barriel, hey, $20, please. We had a wager. He said that Biden would be replaced before the election, on the election ballot. And I said, no, I think that he'll be the one. I think people tend to overreact. And we did that in, I think, November. We did it close to about a year ago. And for the longest time, I thought, I'll be fine. I'm making it. Then you saw the debate and you really started to panic. And of course, Democrats threw Biden under the bus just like that, pivoted 180 and all that very quickly. So we'll keep going though.
DEI is, you don't know what equity is. You don't understand that this is Karl Marx all over the place. You don't understand how much in opposition to the United States Constitution this is. You don't understand how in opposition to God's law this is. And you seemingly haven't kept up with the corruption in the United States government on all sides. I mean, let's just be honest. You can send a good person to Washington and it takes like about 10 days to corrupt them. So, be that as it may, we are. It's one thing to talk about electing Marxists. It's another thing to then deal with objections to voting for the only people that aren't the Marxists. And look, I fully understand the betrayal that many people feel. There is a massive difference between how Trump and the Republicans are approaching the abortion issue now in comparison to 2016.
And so if I understand it right, you've got your abolitionists who would say essentially any law that ends with "and then you can murder your offspring," that is a wicked law and should be fought against. In other words, abolitionists tend to reject incrementalism. Basically, it came out after Roe v. Wade and in his approach where, hey, we're just going to chip away at Roe v. Wade. Hey, if you want to murder your offspring, you got to get permission from your parents. Or the offspring have to be 8 months or 6 months or whatever, or they have to be not that old or whatever. Abolitionists would say, hey, incrementalists, any law that ends with "and then you can murder your offspring" is a wicked bad law, and we got to reject it. Displeases God. It's sinful. That kind of thing. And incrementalists are more pragmatism and built less on principle. They are built more on compromise and less off of just principles and all that, and faithfulness, I would say. And so logically, though, now you have your abolitionists coming out who tend to be more theonomic. You have Dr. James White, who debated Bob Enyart. Well, who's Bob Enyart? He is an open theist, but he's also theonomic, and was someone who I first listened to on the debate. He was for personhood of the unborn. And he would be the one saying all the time, any law that ends with "and then you can murder your offspring" is a bad, wicked law. Well, where do you get that perspective from? Your theonomists. And so your theonomists and your abolitionists are coming out and saying, hey, Trump has pivoted. And he's saying right now that he would veto a federal abortion ban. In other words, hey, and right now on Polymarket, there's a 33% chance, it might have changed, this was about yesterday, but there's about a 33% chance that Republicans could capture the Senate, the House, and the presidency. Whoa, that's actually pretty breathtaking when you think about it. And if they were legitimate conservatives, and if they had a biblical worldview, they could make so many changes there. But they're not legitimate conservatives. They do not have a biblical worldview, and they will not make legitimate reformations there for sure. But Trump is saying essentially, if Republicans take the Senate, the House, and the presidency, and if they got together and decided, hey, there is a federal abortion ban, you cannot murder your offspring anymore in the United States and America, Trump says he would veto that and he would send it back to the states. And so your abolitionists and your theonomists are losing their mind over that, and they should, because Trump has basically come out as he is not a believer. He is a non-Christian, because only a wicked person would veto a law that says you may not murder your offspring. And it also shows that Trump does not believe the unborn are human beings that deserve protection. That's what it shows. It shows really that we do not have any unity with Donald Trump on that issue. He supports murder of, people's offspring before they're born. So, and your theonomists will point that out. And so, Dr. James White is coming out, and I think really he's given some pushback on that. And hey, we don't love it. It's wrong. It's wicked. But the alternative is Kamala Harris. The alternative is Marxism. The alternative is you watch the country burn down very quickly. You watch oppression of Christians and of just society grow very rapidly. And you watch the culture of death take over and wreak death and destruction upon your people. That's his argument. Hey, is that a compelling argument? Let me know that in the comments, right? Or in the chat for sure.
It seems to me it's just been a political calculation. I don't. It's not like there's been. It's very obvious that in 2016.
And so, yeah, in 2016, Trump came out with kind of a came to Jesus moment, a come to Jesus moment. There we go. Saying basically, I had this come to Jesus moment. The unborn, hey, they're real people. The abortion should be abolished, that kind of thing. At one moment in time, he articulated abolitionism, I guess you'd call it, right? Where if you hire an assassin to murder your offspring, that's a crime. At one moment, a very brief moment in time, he came out and voiced something like that. And your evangelicals, your abolitionists, even they got pretty excited over that, and over repealing Roe v. Wade and all that for sure.
When Trump was talking about his judicial picks for the Supreme Court, and that is, of course, about the only brakes that are currently on the system, keeping us from just flying straight into the Soviet Union. Back in 2016, that was an important conversation. A lot of people didn't believe he would follow through. He did. He was given a certain list of the best possible nominees, and then he picked from that list. Funny, I haven't heard anything about that this time around. Have you? Have you? No, I haven't heard a word about it.
And so again, we're on the same page there. He is not making these promises to evangelicals. Evangelicals' seat at the table has been dramatically reduced. For what? It's been reduced for a coalition of, again, RFK Jr., Tulsi, of Democrats who have left the Democrat Party. And you had, who was it? Is it Amber West? Is that her name? Someone in the comments, let me know. I think it's Amber West, who would it be an OnlyFans porn star speak at the RNC? And so there can be debate about that. Hey, how much does Donald Trump control who speaks at the RNC? I imagine that he has veto power over something like that. I imagine. But that is to say, though, that it's very clear to see that it's less about evangelicals having a seat at the table and more about making a big tent right now. And so he's trying to not win the election through evangelical support. He's trying to win the election through building this big tent of, again, RFK Jr., Tulsi. Hey, if you're part of the LGBTQ community or rebellion or whatever, then hey, join the movement as well. You saw that at the RNC for sure. And so you see really in a falling away from evangelicalism as well right now with the Trump campaign. Is it going to work? Yeah, we'll see if it works, because we're told all the time that Republicans need a big tent. And let me know in the comments as well, because this is a discussion for the ages. Should Republicans have a big tent, or should there be more purity going on there, more faithfulness to conservative values? Let me know in the comments section.
Now, it's not like I'm sitting around. I am not a political junkie. Okay, we have to. We're facing the final days of the American Republic, in my opinion, if things go the direction that things are going.
And we agree. And how do we agree in a sense, though? Well, because so many just Americans come out and say, oh, relax, we'll have elections in 2028, we'll have elections in 2022, 2032, and all that. You're overreacting. Well, even communist China has elections. Even Russia has elections. North Korea has elections. Venezuela, didn't they just have elections? And Maduro, he won, but he lost, if that makes sense. America, if we fall to Marxism and social, hey, we'll continue to have elections every 4 years. They just won't matter. Just like they don't matter in Russia and China, North Korea, Venezuela, they won't matter here. And there's a question already today at this moment. Hey, do they even matter here today at all? And we'll find out here very soon. Maybe they do matter. Maybe. And how much do you trust the Republican Party, Donald Trump? Is it a uniparty where, hey, there maybe Trump's part of their plan? Who knows? I don't know. But eventually, elections in America will not matter just as much as it doesn't matter in Russia, China, North Korea, Venezuela.
But I don't sit around following all this stuff. And so if someone has said something, I could miss it. That's fine. But it seems pretty obvious to me, and I'm just giving you my own personal opinions here. It seems very clear to me that some political calculations were made in light of Roe v. Wade and in light of what happened in Ohio and in light of other elections that have taken place since the Dobbs decision came down, that clearly the Democrats believe that baby murder is a winning thing because we have an electorate.
One, Donald Trump will go on to a lot of podcasts, actually. It's something he's doing that Kamala's not doing. He went in on the All In podcast, and he had folks who are more tech savvy, who are into crypto and into politics and into the kind of the future, the economy, those kind of things. Trump did an interview with them for 30, 40 minutes, kind of a longer interview with them. And the All In podcast has a lot of listeners, a lot of subscribers, maybe 1 million. I'd have to go check. But he did an interview with them, and you had to basically, that podcast has a mix of Republicans, Democrats, independents, all that kind of stuff. And your Democrat was very concerned about what, hey, murdering your offspring. Hey, Trump, are you going to ban it everywhere so that I can't murder my offspring? And Trump's answer to that was, hey, it's just going to go to the states. And so don't freak out over it, basically. In a very more moderate position as he goes on to these podcasts that are not, that are not Christian, that are just very mainstream, very popular as well. In my opinion, might sound rather harsh, but American Christians in general had it rather good in their elections as being rather favorable to Christians until recently. Yeah, I'd have to think about that a bit. Hey, where are you from? If you don't mind me asking, what nation are you from here in America or overseas? Or let me know for sure over there. We'll keep going.
That is deeply influenced by a tremendous number of extreme.
Let me interrupt this real quick. Again, I posted a link if anyone wants to come on and chat really about theonomy. And if a theonomist can vote for Donald Trump, that's really what I want to chat about. That's what my focus is on right now, because really it's a pretty thought-provoking question, I think. Also, I'm on X now, and believe it or not, and I'm going to post my just X name. If this were a professional channel, we'd have some links or something in the description or something. Well, it's not. But again, on X, I'm on as Mark Ryan King. Montana Viking was taken, so I couldn't use it. So sad day. And Montana or Mark Ryan Viking was too long, couldn't use that. So join me on X and hey, repost this. I'm going to try to grow on there and talk about these kind of things on Twitter, on X as well.
Extremely immature, worldly rebels against God. And they want the ability to murder babies. That's all there is to it. They think it's a right. They think it's awesome. They think it's great. It's a good thing. So when you have a morally decrepit people like that, and you want to get elected, then you have to pander to their moral decrepancy, in essence. And so a decision has been made. They changed the platform. It's not an inappropriate observation to say that the Republican Party of 2024 is the Democratic Party of 2000. I'm not sure much about 2014, 2004, maybe. I was gonna say about 20 years. And it's true. And that is a betrayal. And here's what I'm hearing. Here's what I'm hearing people saying. And
I zoned out a little bit. Did he say that the Republican Party of 2024 is basically the Democrat Party of 2020 or 20, 2014. And that's basically true. Yeah. That maybe not on some things, but yeah, for sure. Um, Now they are having a few shocks culturally in dealing a non-Christian, increasingly government, which other Christians and non-Christian, secular, pagan, Muslim have to see and feel daily. Yeah, that's one thing to think about. In America, hey, go thank your theonomists, I would think. Go thank your post-mill folks, in that we have a lot of laws in America that are based on upon the word of God and the law of God. Innocent until proven guilty. You have the right to face your accusers. Hey, there needs to be 2 or 3 witnesses. Those kinds of things as well. Hey, you have the right to a fair trial, and it should be speedy as well. We have a lot of Christian ethics from Scripture built into our, say, thanks to John Locke, and not so much Karl Marx. It's switching though. We're moving from Moses to Karl Marx here in America. I don't think anyone would debate that. And I should have worn one of my favorite shirts I have, and I think it's from Apologia. Apologia Studios has a shirt. It says Moses, not Marx. And in America, part of why we will see the judgment and wrath of God on this nation is why people are abandoning Moses, so to speak, right? For what? For Karl Marx. And the Democrats, hey, they are Marxists. Maybe one day we'll do an episode on, should Democrats be church disciplined in America? Should every Democrat face church discipline? Should Democrats be denied communion in the American church? Those are questions that the Christians should be thinking as well, I think. We'll keep going.
And for a while, I bought this. I agreed. And that is, look, if, because I left the Republican Party in the late 90s, as I recall, maybe in the middle 90s, because they were giving money to pro-choice Republican candidates. So that the National Committee would give money to people who were pro-choice as long as they're running as Republicans. And I'm like, nope, not going there. So I went independent, left the Republican Party because I was more conservative than the Republican Party. So I'm to the right of the Republican Party on almost everything, certainly the cultural issues.
When we agreed there, I remember my first time voting. Well, actually, I've forgotten it. John McCain versus Obama. And I think I voted third party there, then Republican everywhere else. Then I remember after that, it would have been Mitt Romney. I didn't vote for him. I voted for third party. Don't regret that one at all. And then Trump as well voted third party. And again, how would I voice that? I don't believe they have the character. It's weird because, hey, today, am I a theonomist? No. And yet I tend to vote like a theonomist, to be honest. It's how I would reconcile that. They don't have the character to be a leader of America. And we'll get into that a little bit here pretty soon.
So here's what people are saying. They're saying, look, if we keep voting for them, then they'll keep moving that direction. We're rewarding them. They know that if we're going to vote, we're going to vote for them. We're not going to vote for that side, unless you're David French, and then you're just completely suicidal.
Yeah. Oh, David French came out and said, hey, we got to vote for Kamala Harris this cycle. And he's a, professing Christian who's pretty influential. I think he should be church disciplined and kicked out of his church, is what I believe there. So,
but you can't keep voting for the lesser of two evils. You always keep getting evil. 20 years ago would have agreed with that thinking. I really would have. I don't anymore. Why? Because.
So I'm interested in your view here, and I don't know how to pronounce her name there, but yeah, Pizza Fat. Imagine professing Christians having to vote non-Christians in those pagan lands. Hopefully now the Christians in the West will understand the worldview, perspective, consequences. And so since, hey, you're in Asia, or the borderlands of Asia, I guess, would you say, what is the biblical view here? Would you, or can you, or should you vote for and support for I like to frame it as people who do not fear God, for unbelievers, essentially, serve false gods who, they do not fear the one true God. They're corrupt and they are, a lot of times, they're incompetent. Should you vote for one over the other and massively support one over the other, or should it exclusively be we will not vote for a person or support a person who does not fear God? Let me know. And let me know the reasoning why or why not. Because at the end of the day, that's the issue here. At the end of the day, the issue is, and we'll get into this more as this video plays out. Your theonomist, if I understand it correctly, your theonomist would say, let's call him your old school theonomist, would say, if you do not fear God, if you're not a competent male, and if you will accept a bribe, or if you're a moneymonger, you're not fit for public office as a governor, as a president, as a mayor, as a sheriff, that kind of thing. Your theonomist, if I understand it historically, even in the States, if I understand it correctly, in the States, in the United States of America, we used to have states who would say, if you do not fear God, you cannot be in leadership in the state as a governor, for instance, or as probably your other leaders in the state as well. I don't know how far down the list they would go. Well, where historically would that mindset come from? Your theonomist. Is that a good view to have now? We're kind of in opposite land now, as people have departed from a Christian worldview. Why? Because prayer is taken out of schools, the Bible's taken out of schools, and you have this public education that's saturated with secular, humanistic, Marxist paganism, basically, is what we are going through right now. FYI, not a theonomist self-wise, although in some ways sympathetic to their point of view. Okay. And so are you familiar with theonomy? Hey, I know enough to be dangerous, I guess. Have I read the leading theonomists, which would be Bronson and Abraham Kuyper? Kuyper, there we go. No, I haven't. And yet I'm familiar with some of the arguments. We could talk about that a little bit. But again, is that something that we should hold to today? Again, old school America, more theonomic. If you don't fear God, if you're not a competent man, and if you accept bribes or are a money monger, you are not fit for office. You cannot run for office. End of story. Is that a good view to have here now today, or is it not? And it gets very confusing for me. Why? Because Dr. James White would be a theonomist, and yet he's functioning now not as a theonomist, but his foundation, I think, is situational ethics here. And the arguments that you'll hear come out of his mouth, I don't think any of them are theonomic arguments. I think every single argument is situational ethics from a Christian perspective. Hey, if we don't vote for Trump and Kamala, the Marxist, is voted in, then there's going to be death and destruction like never before. Well, that's a situational ethics argument.
And people keep saying, you're a post-millennialist. Again, hello, has nothing to do with recognizing that you're living in a culture under the judgment of God.
Now, so you have people who are criticizing Dr. James White. Hey, I thought you were post-millennialist. Well, why would this view, hey, you can't vote for Donald Trump if you're post-millennials, why would that be a valid criticism? I think. Again, a post-millennialist would say, hey, Christianity is going to flood the earth and bring in this golden age, this peaceful age that's been just unprecedented. Well, if you believe in that during this golden post-millennial age, what is going to happen? If I understand it correctly, Christ will be ruling in heaven from his throne, and you will have presidents and governors and world leaders of the world, throughout the world, who are what? They fear God, they aren't corrupt and they're competent men. If you are post-millennial, you have to believe in that. If you're post-millennial, can you believe that men who do not fear God bring in this golden, unprecedented, peaceful age where Christianity just floods the earth? No, you cannot believe in that. It's just logical lunacy to believe in something like that. If you're a theonomist, again, you have to believe that in the future, men who fear God will rule or lead, or there'll be presidents and kings and rulers throughout the earth who fear God. And so that creates kind of a some friction. I like to call it some theological schizophrenia going on there. And that, hey, you say that you're post-millennial, and then in the future you'll have men who fear God, who are leaders, and yet you're departing from electing and supporting and voting for men who fear God as leaders now. During the post-millennial reign, could you vote for and support men who don't fear God as leaders? I don't think so. If you have that worldview, but could you do it now here today? If you resort to situational ethics, you really could. If you resort to theonomy, the law of God, what the Bible says, again, hey, if you don't fear God, if you're not a competent male, and if you and it's not all three. It's not like, oh, hey, 3 strikes, you're out, or 2 strikes, you're out. I think it's a 1 strike, you're out. You don't fear God, you're out. Even if you meet the other 2 qualifications, you're not a competent male, you're out. Even if you don't meet the other qualifications. And if you, hey, you fear God and you're a competent man, but you're a moneymonger and you're corrupt and you accept bribes, you're out, even though you meet the other 2 qualifications.
And
by the way, hey, let's take that standard. Hey, does Kamala Harris meet that standard? No. Does any Democrat meet that standard? Probably not. Probably not a single Democrat meets that standard. Why? Because if you favor murdering your offspring, you don't fear God and you're not competent. Why? The role of the government is to protect life, not murder life. And so, to my knowledge, I think every single Democrat is not eligible for public office, in my opinion. Hey, let's read this comment real quick. I'm late, but glad you're back, brother. Checked out your last video. Hey, thanks for checking it out. Hopefully I'm back each week, maybe with multiple videos. Who knows? Can you be God-fearing and also accept bribes? And those 3 things I think are interwoven, because ultimately, there's only one person who meets those 3 qualifications, and that's the Lord Jesus Christ. Ultimately, only Jesus Christ feared God, how he kept his commandments, all of them perfectly, who he's competent, more than for sure, right? And not only that, he's not corrupt and he does not accept bribes. There's equal weights and measures. There's perfect justice with the Lord Jesus Christ, and he will he will administer perfect justice during the Bema seat judgment, rewards judgment for believers, and for the great white throne judgment. There'll be no corruption there. That's why it's the great white. It's purity. There's no corruption there. What you did, you done, and you're going to be judged for it for all eternity. Every sin in the history of the universe will be judged by God. He will not turn a blind eye to any sin. It will either be punished and pardoned in Christ at the cross, or it will be punished in hell for all eternity at the great white throne judgment, with no corruption, no turning a blind eye to any, hey, you're a Republican, you're good to go. No tribalism during this great white throne judgment. You're either clothed in the righteousness of the Lord Jesus Christ, or you're clothed in your own filthy garments and will be judged accordingly. So with that, also never heard of this post-millennial ideology until very recently, especially in the COVID lockdown era. Growing up was taught pre-millennial, and online with some arguments for millennialism. Yeah, for sure. During the post-COVID, things have really been shaken up, for sure. And the post-millennial, oh, what would you call it, movement has really gained a lot of momentum here in America, for sure. Why would that be? When uh, I think, in my opinion, the post millennial movement is a lot more confrontational with a culture that's departing from God, for sure. And there's a lot more anger and chaos and division going on in America. And during times like that, a lot of people can join that movement. Whereas dispensationalism tends to be less confrontational. Hey, let's just have peace. Um, Everyone be nice. And we're just waiting for the Lord Jesus Christ to return. We're going to be persecuted until that happens. And so we just try to preach the gospel, be good neighbors, live a Christian life, that kind of thing until the Lord Jesus Christ comes and maybe we can escape from it all, essentially, is maybe more the accusation towards them. I'd say you don't fear God if that's the case. Yeah, and so they're all intertwined. Hey, if you accept a bribe, then you don't fear God. If you're not competent, well, maybe there's circumstances out of your control for that. But if we went down that checklist, hey, does Donald Trump, we already went through Kamala Harris and every Democrat out there, they do not meet those requirements. Very easy. And they should probably be church disciplined as well and deny communion as well. But then if we think, hey, Donald Trump, well, he's a Republican, so he meets all those requirements, right? That's what tribalism would say. That's what, if we went to just our cultural Christianity or what's out there, they would say, of course, he's a Republican. Well, does Donald Trump fear God? Again, what was it, 8 years ago? He came out and said, hey, I don't have anything to ask forgiveness for God. Why should I ask for forgiveness for him? Well, that's someone who does not fear God, because again, especially if you're reformed, there's the old Paul Washer quote. It's not that unbelievers, it's not that you've sinned against God. You've done nothing in your life except sin against God. And so Donald Trump 1,000,000% does not have a reformed view of sin, for sure. Why? Yeah, I haven't sinned against God. I don't have anything to apologize there. No, if if you had a biblical worldview before conversion, before you're regenerate, before you're a believer, it's not that you sin against God. You've done nothing except sin against God. And I go, hey, I'm Mark. I go to Pentecostal church. I have a lot of people disagree with that, right? Tons of people disagree with that. Mainstream evangelicalism even disagree with that. We could go into why that's true, but we'll keep moving. Read a few more comments as well. But again, let's backtrack to that. Does Donald Trump fear God? No. Partially, how can we say that? He's come out and said again that he would veto a law from Congress that's passed on banning murdering your offspring. He would veto that. You cannot fear God and veto a bill that bans murdering your offspring. That's evidence that he does not fear God. Just case in point. And someone who doesn't fear God when it comes to murder, they do not fear God when it comes to lying, cheating, stealing. There'll be corruption as well. Why? They're interwoven. And you will have Democrats come out, and how can you? Well, Mark, yeah, they support murdering their offspring, but that's it. That's the only thing. No, it's worse than that. You can see the corruption behind the Democrat Party. What's an example of that? Just one example of the millions, right? Of the many. Kamala Harris has come out and said, hey, let's give every first-time home buyer $25,000, just free money. What is that? That's corruption going on. That's bribery going on with the government. Just point blank is what's going on there. And you can see that not with Kamala Harris, but you can see that with Donald Trump as well. When he was speaking at the RNC in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I believe, he was saying how, hey, I brought all this money here, and you guys got to vote for me after bringing all this money and all this stuff to Milwaukee, Wisconsin as well. Small example, but that would be corruption. Hey, I'm doing this for you. You owe me. You got to vote for me as well. So we'll keep going on from there. But again, yeah, Donald Trump fearing God, no, that's a big no. The corruption is a no, and being competent. Could Trump check the box of he is competent? In the Bible's the standard, not the situational ethics thing, where we find ourselves where he's not a Marxist, so he's competent. No, don't really care about that. But is he biblically competent? You could debate on that a little bit, but the other two are an obvious no, I think. So the Black progressive churches blend in Marxism and don't feel squeamish about mixing politics in religion. Justice Jackson compared Deborah, Justice Thomas compared to Judas. See woke preach. In this election cycle, we're seeing a lot more people leave the Democratic Party. And I wonder how many, a lot of minorities leave the Democratic Party. I wonder how many of them are Christians or born again Christians. Because there's a breaking point for sure. And progressive churches abuse Matthew 25 for socialism. Yeah, just saying hi, old Farmer Dan. Hey, there we go. Cool. Good to see you in the chat. Breon Hill, if more churches actually exercise church discipline, there wouldn't be so many goats among the sheep. People like Trump and Harris wouldn't be able to claim allegiance to Christianity. Yeah, and that's one of the problems today we see with the seeker-sensitive movement. It's really gutted a lot of the intellectualism out of the church, I think, just my opinion. And then that goes downstream, though, because in our politics, again, a lot of the intellectualism has been gutted out of our politics as well. And we just have bullet points: build the wall, no tax on tips, different kind of bullet point things. The Methodist Church supports sexual revolutionaries. Yeah, a lot of our churches here have fallen for sure. Unpopular opinion, maybe, but Trump at worst is a pagan king, something in between a Persian Nebuchadnezzar type of ruler. Yeah, and so people in the past have compared him to King Cyrus, who God used to accomplish his purposes back in the day. And what fun building? Was it fun? Was it fun building a wall? I think. Double check. Someone double check me on that, right? Because he funded that when, who was it? Was it Ezra or Nehemiah? One of his servants was full of grief. So, and so whether it's King Cyrus, King Nebuchadnezzar, the heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he wills. God, I would say, will use it to accomplish his purposes, but not in a passive way, but in an active way, I think. Perhaps it would be wise for those who really care to preserve the Christian culture in all seriousness to pray for godly, biblical, staunch government ministers in the mold of a Daniel and his three friends. Yeah, for sure. And it's ironic because right now your socialist Bernie Sanders came out a while ago, and he was just an attack dog against a Christian, saying, hey, you're a Christian and you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and that Muslims will go to eternal damnation in hell. if you believe that that Muslims will face eternal hell, you're not fit to be in government. That is an argument from Bernie Sanders. And that is an argument that will become mainstream Democratic within X amount of years, right? It used to be Bernie Sanders, hey, $15 minimum wage. And people thought he was crazy for that. Well, Democrats embraced that and now want 20, 30, $1 million minimum wage, essentially. We got Eric here. Good to see you on another live stream, brother. Perhaps it would be wise for those who really care. Okay, I read that one a second ago. Hey, brother, got that. All right, let's go back to the video.
I am not. I actually lean away from this conclusion, but I lean away from the conclusion that we are going to have a fair and free election in a matter of weeks. I don't see how what happened last time has actually been fixed. I've seen a few things. I've seen a.
Well, will we have a fair and free election? You know, there are studies going out saying how much Google influences elections and how many votes just Google and its bias will give Democrats in elections. You know, and you could argue, well, they're a company, they can use their free speech, they can do as they please. That could be an argument there. And by the way, Google's coming out with Google Gemini, the most woke AI out there. And that would be very interesting to see how authoritarian, how censorious Google Gemini is. They went viral was it a year ago? It's been a long time ago now for when Google Gemini came out. And again, hey, Google Gemini, make an image of the founding fathers. And half of them, they were all minorities. They were every color under the sun. And they were men, they were women. They were just, you know, the diverse, the DEI thing. Hey, make a video or make an image for me of Vikings. Again, you have every ethnicity under the sun. The same thing. Hey, that bad German party, make an image of them. And you have the DEI thing as well. And so again, you know, Google Gemini, the AI is very woke, and it'll be interesting to see how, again, their worldview, which would be more authoritarian, anti-Christian, how that plays out in AI as time goes on.
Band-aid over here and a band-aid over there, and one state over here decide, well, we kicked 1 million people off the voter rolls. Well, okay, great. How many millions of others have snuck on since, who knows? So I'm really having to try to work up positive hope to actually think there's any chance that the Marxists will not be elected in November, to be honest with you. But
and honestly, I mean, if you're a Christian, if you're a believer, then hey, if we had to pick, hey, it's Trump or it's Kamala, which one would we rather have? Trump for sure, out of just the two. And again, reality is it'll, apart from an act of God, it'll be Trump or Kamala Harris in office, unless hey, there could be an assassination attempt. There could be, who knows what could happen in the future. But apart from something like that happening, it's Trump or Kamala. And if you're a Christian, hey, Trump is a lot more favorable to Christians than the Marxists for sure. We all get that, I would think, for sure.
Corruption issue aside, the reason that I live in Maricopa County, so I've even got less reason to believe that my vote will even be counted, or be counted for the people I gave it to, or whatever. It's just where I live, sort of like living in Chicago. But despite all of that, the difference, and every 4 years, this is the most significant election of our lifetimes. You've heard it so many times that it's just like, it's the boy who cried wolf. You stop listening to it and don't even hear it anymore. When you look at the level,
let me know, is this the most important election of our lifetimes? Let me know in the comment section. So how I would answer that is, in my worldview, yes and no. If Kamala Harris wins the presidency, but then you have a Republican House and Senate, It's not. There'll be so much friction, and Kamala won't be able to get much done except through what executive unconstitutional executive orders. They'll have some impact, but there'll be a lot of gridlock. And again, right now, if you look at it, Republicans have 48 safe seats where they're basically got 48 Senate seats locked in. They're going to win those 48 no matter what. Just book it. Um, Democrats only have it's like 41, I think. And so in all the prediction markets, Republicans are predicted to win probably at least 51 bare bones. If disaster strikes, probably 52, maybe 53 Senate seats. And so Republicans will probably win the Senate, um, unless there's some disaster, unless there's just mass cheating or who knows what happens. Republicans will probably win the Senate. The House of Representatives is kind of a coin flip, and if you had to pick one or the other, it'll probably go to Democrats, maybe, but that's more of a toss-up of a coin flip. Uh, and so, if is it the most important election of our lifetimes? I don't think that you will say that Republicans win the House, the Senate, and the presidency. They could make some great reforms, some great um, laws come out of that. I wouldn't hold my breath personally. I would not hold my breath at all. But hey, it's not Democrats, it's not the Marxist stuff. That's great. Would you see if you had all Republicans come to power, the House, the Senate, the presidency? Could we see a return to fiscal responsibility? I don't believe that. I don't believe. We asked earlier, is Donald Trump competent? Well, when it comes to limited government and when it comes to putting a budget together, he is a very big spender. I don't think there's competence there, at least, is what I would say. Instead of relying on the Republican Party to fend off Marxism, I would rather not join the Republicans in their sins, but rather trust God. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, Nicholas and I have a fairly similar worldview here. If we asked our theonomic friends, brothers and sisters in Christ, and said, "Hey, it looks like you guys are resorting to situational ethics here," and instead of relying on what God has spoken in the Old Testament, hey, if you're a leader, and we should probably go to the text. I've covered it before in other videos, but in Exodus 18, you have Moses. He's being overwhelmed. Why? Because people are taking all their problems to Moses, and he's judging all these people's problems. Then I believe it's his father-in-law, Jethro, comes to him and says, "Hey, Moses, you're being overwhelmed. Here's what you need to do. You need to put in leaders who do what? They fear God, they're competent men, and they're not corrupt. You need to put them in leaders of tens, hundreds, thousands, etc." Um, and so that's my framework. And if you're dispensational, you could make the argument that, oh, hey, that was for Israel. We don't live in Israel. Israel was run as a what do you call it? Theocracy. There we go. We don't live in a theocracy today. We live in a democracy. No, we don't. We live in a constitutional republic, and there's a big difference there. And so, since we don't live in a theocracy, we're not Israel. That doesn't really apply to us today. That is how your more conservative, dispensational, mainstream evangelicals would kind of, I don't want to use the word weasel, but reason yourself through that, right? Um, and it's weird because you had Pastor Kerry Gordon, who is a pastor, I believe, out of a non-denominational kind of mainstream, definitely not theonomic or Reformed church, come out and say, "Hey, Exodus 18, Trump doesn't meet that, and if a candidate doesn't meet those qualifications there, I'm not going to vote for him." And as he reasoned through that, yeah, I agreed with them. But then you have your theonomists come out, and they're basically ignoring, like like Exodus 18, and they are resorting, when I look at it, to situational ethics every single time, is what their argument appears to be to me. Situational ethics with a Christian worldview built into it, arguably, uh, is what it looks like to me, at least. And the criticism is, hey, are you guys theonomous or are you not theonomous? What's going on here? That's at least my criticism, because I cannot reconcile how someone can be an abolitionist and then just kind of say Exodus 18. No, we're not. That's not our worldview here that factors into our equation. Our worldview is, hey, we want as least amount of death, destruction, chaos as possible. And so we're going to vote for the lesser of two evils. Now, one of the big quotes out there is, when faced with the lesser of two evils, choose neither. Hey, of the we shouldn't choose any of the evils that are out there. And do I agree with that or disagree with that? Again, I guess my opinion is that if someone meets those three qualifications, hey, they fear God, they're not corrupt, and they're competent men, vote for them. Or hey, they're eligible to be a leader. And ultimately, only the Lord Jesus Christ fits that description. At the end of the day, it's only the Lord Jesus Christ. But God in his grace told Moses, well, and that's actually a narrative. And so Jethro giving Moses that advice, hey, competent men, fear God, not corrupt, put them as leaders. Where does that wisdom derive from? Does that derive from Jethro or does that derive from God? I believe it derives from God. Is that limited to just Israel in that time, in that place? And that's it. That's all she wrote. And we shouldn't use that wisdom now, here, today. I think having leaders who fear God, that's timeless. Go to any age. You always want men who fear God as leaders. And the men thing, you could have a debate over that, right? But there should always be leaders who fear God. It doesn't matter past, present, future. Your leaders should always fear God. Well, should they be competent? Again, past, present, future, they should always be competent. I think, call me crazy. And again, if we went further down the list, corrupt, past, present, future, your leaders should always be not corrupt. It seems like Jethro's advice to Moses ultimately is only found in Jesus Christ, but it's also timeless throughout all the ages. And so that's why, I tend to be theonomic there. I think, and I think that's how your theonomists who were post-mill in the past have said to all of your elected leaders out there, hey, you can't be an atheist if you're going to be in public office. You got to fear God, essentially. That's the worldview that would make that. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? That should be a discussion that Christians have. Should it be within your nation where you must fear God if you're going to be a president, a governor, a leader in your nation? That's a discussion Christians should have. But, we're too busy being entertained and on our phones to have that discussion or consider that discussion. Why American Christians have really been dumbed down and don't think about these kind of things. Probably spent 2 seconds thinking about probably 0 seconds thinking about these things for many of your average evangelical Christians out there. Trump has been competent in selecting Supreme Court justice nominees. We really do a lot of cherry picking with the elections. So yeah, we James Irvin, I might push back on that a little bit. Why? Because Trump could have appointed Supreme Court nominees who were abolitionists who would say it's always not only is Roe v. Wade overturned, but it is now a crime to hire an assassin and murder your offspring. Trump could have, if the standard is God's standard of what does the government do? It punishes evildoers and it protects life. Trump should, the bar is a bit higher, I think. Yeah, we got some decent, and James White will come out and say, yeah, he kept that promise. We had some decent Supreme Court just nominees. Well, your abolitionists were coming out at the time, who again are more theonomic, and they were saying, hey, those justices that Trump put in there should have been more, I guess you could say, theonomic. They should have been more, nope, God's law says that abortion is murder and you may not murder your offspring, and that's a crime. And could the justices have come out with that decision? Yes, they could have, for sure, I believe. But hindsight's 2020. Check this out. Are being played. I'll have to go back and watch that a bit later for sure. Oh, let's see. We do a lot of cherry picking to avoid rank Marxism. Yeah. My vote is reserved for parent Christians. I don't want to have an unchristian hand in governance. And beyond that, let me dive into something in Montana. In Montana, we have a governor. Our governor's, he was in national news years ago. Why? Because he body slammed a leftist reporter, and he became a lot more popular in Montana, a lot more kind of popular nationwide from your conservatives after he body slammed that reporter. Well, he gets elected with, and just like Donald Trump, he's got that mug shot. And that mug shot, he just grew in popularity. And our governor, he wasn't our governor before, now he's our governor after body slamming that reporter. Well, he's very moderate. I've seen him probably 5, 6, 7 times by now, shaking his hand probably 5, 6, 7 times by now, and chat with him, talk to his wife, that kind of thing. Very, very likable, very good politician when he's not body slamming people, right? But very, very more moderate. And I believe I don't know if he's born in California, spent a lot of time in California. And that's the thing in Montana, hate California, and you just kind of cringe. But he's been very more moderate here in Montana. He did pass a heartbeat bill, I think, in Montana. Hey, if your child is a heartbeat, you can't murder him. So is that a good thing? If you talk to your abolitionist, not so much. Now, the abolitionist movement in Montana is practically non-existent, I would say. But he would be pretty pro-life, we could say, in that movement. And right now in Montana, there's a movement to overturn that and to enshrine, murdering your offspring all the way up till birth within law. Could that happen? I think it will probably pass in Montana, because Montana tends to be more of a Trump kind of conservative, but not really kind of state. It'll be interesting to see if that passes. But again, Greg Gianforte, he'll come to our, I don't know if I call them rallies, but events, and he'll open in prayer. He'll pray in Jesus' name. He will profess to be a Christian, and it seems to be genuine. I don't know, other than body slamming reporters, I don't have anything that would say maybe he's not. But again, he's been more moderate of a governor here in Montana. The most conservative politician that we have in Montana was Matt Rosendale, but he's Catholic. And so Matt Rosendale was part of the Freedom Caucus. He would just cut the budget. Hey, we're going to slash the budget. No one gets a raise. And you're lucky that you're not getting a D raise, whatever that is, right? You're not getting your pay docked, right? Within his office or sector that he was in charge of. Again, he's part of the Freedom Caucus. He is probably the most conservative politician in Montana that I know about. He's Catholic. So does he meet the those three qualifications? You see the conundrum here that even theonomists, even Christians would be, uh, be in here. Why you have um, a conservative who is he's more conservative. You could argue is more competent than Gianforte, who's very moderate, but arguably checks the box enough on pro-life. That would be a debate for sure. But say that they're primarying each other for who's going to be governor. Who should you support? The moderate person who arguably fears God, or the Catholic who is light and day more conservative than your moderate? Could you call him a rhino? He's very moderate. And he came out supporting someone who is more moderate, and basically getting rid of your conservative there. That's what we're dealing with in Montana. In Montana, we had I believe it's unanimous. I believe it was 7 Supreme Court. They're not justice. We couldn't call them justice. There's nothing justice about them. But they came out and said, I believe unanimously, it'd be all 7, or is it 5 or whatever, 7. Yes, you do not have to tell your parents in order to murder your offspring if you're a minor, which is just radical. But Montana Supreme Court is one of the most wicked, evil ones out there, and they'll face God for that. That's what we're facing in Montana, in a very arguably conservative state. We had 16 years of Democratic governors. But that winter's over for sure. And, I feel good voting for Gianforte. Yeah, he's moderate. I don't feel great about it, but I feel that he at least fears God, is competent, and isn't corrupt. So, and I feel good about it. Not great. So,
of evil. And I mean evil, biblical, moral, ethical evil represented by the Marxists in this election. I mean, I'm looking at a Federalist article that effective July of 2025, teacher licensing rules passed last year in Minnesota under Democrat Governor Tim Walz will ban practicing Christians, Jews, and Muslims from teaching in public schools. Why? Because you must affirm all the gender ideology insanity.
And I remember hearing this a while ago. As Christians, we don't want to retreat from the world. And yet, hey, there's a day and age coming where if you're a believer, you're going to be relegated to the undesirable jobs of society, right? If you're a Christian and you want to be a teacher, well, now you have to submit to these different rules going on here, where you affirm the LGBTQ stuff going on. You have to affirm things that go against God's law, essentially. And if you are a Christian, you cannot affirm this godless thing. And so in Minnesota, essentially, you cannot be a teacher, or you're opening, say that you decide, well, I'm just going to be a Christian teacher in Minnesota. I'm not going to affirm the nonsense that's going on there. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Well, what's going on with your Christian college or university or club? You're opening yourself up to a lawsuit. And with all the lawfare that we've seen recently, yeah, they'll sue you in a second. They'll sue you, and they'll sue you, not just once. They'll probably sue you 34 times, right? And bankrupt you 35 different times, 35 different ways. That's really what we're up against, where, again, under a Christian worldview, which we're departing from, there's equal scales, there's fair trials. There won't be any fair trials in Minnesota over this kind of stuff, or fair judgments, fair justice over it. No, you're a Christian. You refuse to capitulate to the LGBTQ stuff. When you're a teacher, when you are in whatever job you have, you're opening yourself up to financial oblivion. That's what's going on. And Dr. James White understands that more than the rest of us who have been dumbed down understand it for sure. Uh, they're otherifying us. That leads to letting us be killed by the government. Yeah, and when you hear Democrats talking about the MAGA people, not everyone, but just the MAGA people, and they're dehumanizing them, they're othering them for sure as well. You can see how the future of this country, there's going to be a lot of chaos and conflict and destruction and that kind of thing going on for sure. And it's just growing.
To teach in public schools in Minnesota. That's evil.
And on a side note, in Polymarket, again, which I love looking at, there is something that people can wager on is, will Donald Trump and Kamala Harris shake hands before the presidential debate? And it's very interesting. If you had to guess in the live chat, what's the percentage at right now? Are we at, hey, it's 50-50. It's a coin toss that they will shake hands before the presidential debate. Is it 40% chance, 30, 100% chance? What do you think in the comments section? What's the chances that the poly market, the betting market has placed that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump will shake hands before the debate? Let me know. And then after we have some guesses, then I will tell you the results, if I remember them right. And it's probably changed. And their debate is in 2 or 3 weeks for sure. The entire world has been dumbed down. Even grown adults complain about reading a few lines of text like it's an effort. Yeah, and that's why one of my favorite quotes out there that every Christian should think about and live by really is Paul Washer's quote, and I'm going to butcher it. On this generation's grave, it will say, "This generation was entertained to death." Just book it. Entertainment has really gutted, gutted society right now. Yeah, for sure. So, and you can see how this would be a side tangent, but how do you get communism and Marxism and socialism? Well, part of the early stages is you have to get entertainment out there and entertain people back when they're really educated and there's more academia. And communism and socialism and Marxism, it's very condemned, hotly condemned. Well, how do you overcome that? Entertainment. That's the first one of the first stages there. So we'll keep going. I'll read some comments.
That is a barefaced, we hate you, God, we hate your creation, we hate how you made everything. Do your best to destroy us. Perspective. Okay, that's Tim Walz. That's what these people are. There's video of the Minnesota. Well, not only is there video of the drag queen stuff that they had in the Capitol under Walz, but there's video of him signing that barbaric abortion up to birth law, as well as the one that protects doctors. If an abortion's botched, you have a live birthing, just let it lay there until it dies. We're talking Nazi level inhumanity, Mengele level inhumanity. And I don't think you can vote for Mengele. Okay, so people who have the same moral worldview probably can't vote for them either. This situation we're facing right now, let's say there's a chance of a
Wait, so we should go back and just, let me go back and play that again, because hey, this is just my opinion, but I'm right about this. 1,000,000% right about this. Let me play that one more time.
Probably can't vote for them either. This situation we're facing right now.
So again, I've made the assertion today, hey, Dr. James White, his argument here, it's situational ethics. And there you have him saying, this situation that we find ourselves in here today, something like that, right? And so there it is. Hey, it is situational ethics that's going on behind his reasoning there for sure. And so when theonomists don't believe in theonomy, and the argument isn't theonomy, or why we can support and vote, why we can support and get behind candidates who don't fear God, aren't competent, and are corrupt. When that's not the discussion, but situational ethics is the foundation of the argument, it makes me a lot more, it makes it easier for me to say, hey, even theonomists don't believe in theonomy, and so let's ignore it at the end of the day, essentially. And so if Dr. James White were to come out and say, hey, how this is how theonomy and voting for Trump, how it is consistent and not theologically schizophrenic, then I'd be open to hearing it. And it'd be I don't see it. Logically, I just don't see it. I'd be open to hearing it, for sure. But that's not what we're hearing today. Again, we're hearing situational ethics. And, uh, on the surface, I don't think any believer like Dr. James White, Steve Lawson, John MacArthur, etc., would say situational ethics is something to hang your hat on. But maybe not. Let me know. Let me know what you think there. You have Todd Friel, and he was, again, really, I remember this would have been about 12 years ago, actually. And he was put under blast for what? For supporting, I think it's Mitt Romney at the time, and losing a lot of support over it from Christians. And Todd Friel's argument was, hey, what should a Christian do? You vote for the lesser of two evils all the time. And so he would say, hey, if you have the most wicked person that you could think of, and the alternative was, that bad party from Germany, right? You vote for the bad party from Germany, just as long as they're not quite as evil as the other alternative. And I remember hearing that argument at the time from Todd Friel on Wretched Radio and just cringing. There is no amount of evil that you wouldn't support and vote for, as long as the alternative is more wicked and evil and reaps more death and destruction. And he went so far as to even just, hey, admitting that. Whereas your theonomist, I would think, would have to say, well, no, if you don't fear God, if you're corrupt, or if you aren't competent, we're not voting for you, we're not supporting you. End of story. And that's a pretty simple standard that I think that's good there. Hey, God replaced King Saul as king. Why? Because he would not keep God's commandments. And so God replaced him. Well, what is keeping God's commandments? Well, if you fear God, you will obey what he commands, essentially. And so we see God replacing King Saul over that. Then you see King David. Did King David keep God's commands and fear God? Well, ultimately, only the Lord Jesus Christ does that, right? But God, in his grace, will raise up people who meet those three qualifications. One of the charges, by the way, brought against theonomists, not even theonomists, but people who hold this view, which would be even your non-denominational mainstream pastors like Kerry Gordon. One of the objections brought to them would be, hey, if you hold to this, you're not going to be able to vote for anyone. No one's going to meet these qualifications. And again, ultimately, only Jesus Christ does. But in this narrative of Moses and Jethro, they are able to find many people, at least 70, right, who meet these qualifications. In other words, God is able and willing to raise up people who meet these three simple, yet hard, I think, qualifications. God is able to do it. He did it how many thousand years ago? He's able to do it today. He's able to do it similarly with elders of the church. You could look at those qualifications and say, well, that's crazy. No one will be able to. No, many men, and exclusively men, meet those qualifications to be shepherds and elders of and overseers of God's church. And there are many people. Likewise, could you argue more people? You could argue that those qualifications are easier than meeting qualifications to be a shepherd and pastor. If you're a pastor, you got to fear God, right? If you're a pastor, should you be competent, proud, in those qualifications at least? And should you be corrupt? You probably shouldn't be a corrupt pastor, right? But there's probably more stringent qualifications if you just think about it for pastor than for an elder in the Old Testament that was selected. So, let's see. Yeah, resorting to the 2024 Republican Party platform reminds me of when Israel wanted a human king instead of a God as king, of God as king. Yeah. And it's just built of compromise, and you're abolitionists. Again, they would say, hey, you incrementalists, you're built on compromise. We're built upon, principles, and not that compromise that you like so much. Oh yeah, Todd Friel and his pinwheels on the head, because government said was just that bad. Yeah, and that's another argument that you could have. If I understand it correctly, part of the discussion will be if you talk to Jim Durbin, or Jeff Durbin. There we go. Would be, can the government just make up capricious laws? And did they determine what right and wrong is? No, it's God that does. Um, that'd be part of the discussion. But yeah, I remember that as well, brother. And I did a video on that as well. Because yeah, if the Todd Friel, if I understand it right, he would say if the government comes out with a law that says you got to move like a cow every 5 minutes, well, then you got to move like a cow every 5 minutes. Um, and that's absurd. But, as a Christian, would it be wicked and wrong and sin for you not to move like a cow every 5 minutes if the government said you gotta? I guess after 2020, after all the mask stuff and after the COVID stuff, those are probably questions that you should probably ask yourself. So we're in the twilight zone. We're in the twilight zone. Why? Because I go to Assembly of God Church. You could call me, I got Pentecostal roots, you could say. And so you have a Pentecostal, could you say, rebuking a theonomist for not being a theonomist with Dr. James White. Hey, where's the theonomy here? And why do you have a Pentecostal? I don't have that worldview really anymore. But someone who was raised in the Assembly of God Church, why do you have them rebuking you or correcting you or challenging you, whatever you want to call it, on theonomy here and saying, hey, there's situational ethics, and why don't theonomists practice theonomy and believe in it? That's kind of the twilight zone. So, and there's been a little bit of disrespect towards Dr. James White, which has been a bit, I think, distasteful over boomer stuff. I don't think people should interact with elders that way, the way that's been done. And that's just me looking from the outside. I'm finally on Twitter. Let me say it one more time. Go follow me on Twitter. It is Mark Ryan King. Viking wouldn't fit. But I'll try to get that, growing over time. So we'll see how that works. We'll see how long. It's amazing that I haven't been banned or censored ever on YouTube. And I say all the time, it should be a crime for Kamala or for Democrats. It should be a crime for them to hire assassins to murder their children, for anyone to do that. And I've never been banned or censored for YouTube for saying that. One of these days, my time will come. And the AI is getting smarter, and they'll probably just use the AI stuff to pick up on that and ban, one of these days. Who knows? Moving like a cow, wearing pinwheels are mere gestures only applicable to the purpose of proving you worship a state. These are pinches of incense. Yeah, you could argue that if you obey all those ludicrous things, you're essentially saying that Caesar is Lord. That could be an argument that people could make. Question, not to stereotype, but are theonomists tend to be more so-called Christian nationalist leaning? Yeah, that's a very fair, what would you call it? Yes. Yeah, that a very fair observation. Logically, if someone's to be consistent, a theonomist would tend to be more Christian nationalist leaning. Why? Because a theonomist, again, if you're a theonomist and you would say that you cannot be in leadership as a president, governor, etc., mayor, sheriff, etc., unless you are a God-fearing person and not which God? The Hindu God, or what? There's probably millions of them, right? one of the millions of Hindu gods, or the Buddhist God, or the God of atheism, or the God of fill in the blank. No, the Christian God, exclusively the Christian God. Your theonomist would say, if you do not believe exclusively in the Christian God, if you don't fear him, then you cannot be in office. Theonomists generally, I think, would have that view. Well, yeah, they have that view, but do they ever apply it? If they're electing Donald Trump, they're not really applying it. I would think, but that's just me. But again, your theonomists who are old school 1700s, maybe 1600s even. I'm not some expert on it, but again, a lot of our states had in their, I believe, their constitutions and their founding documents, hey, if you are an atheist, you cannot be in public office. Where do you get that from? Theonomists. So, wonder how long before you get trolled on Twitter for triggering all the liberals. Yeah, that'll be interesting. I go to Reddit sometimes, and Reddit seems to be a lot more liberal than Twitter. And then I'll post on its Daily Wire with Ben Shapiro, and they had an article that was stated basically Trump will veto a federal ban on abortion. And I was just, I guess as a keyword warrior there. And I was telling everyone, hey, no, it should be a crime for anyone to hire an assassin to murder their offspring. I was telling that to a lot of people in the Daily Wire, right? Really conservative, not really. And you have Ben Shapiro all the time. He'll come out and say, hey guys, I'm the most conservative person that exists. And even when it comes to abortion, I think that it should be banned completely. But we got to compromise on this. And I'm the most conservative person ever on this. And it is, when you have a biblical standard there, no, you're not, conservative there, or biblical there, or God-fearing there. And why do I say that? Ben Shapiro would say, hey, it shouldn't be a crime for women to hire assassins, murder their children. That shouldn't be a crime. And you should definitely never run on that for sure. And you shouldn't have bills like that for sure. And Trump, when he's saying, hey, just send it back to the states, hey, that's a very moderate, that's a very reasonable position. And it's, if you had the position of, hey, it should be a crime to murder your offspring, well, that's just radical. You'll lose votes that way. There goes the big tent. No one could ever win an election that way. And so that's just ludicrous and insane. It'll never work. You should never do it. That is where situational ethics will lead you to the end of the day, for sure. And so, if Dr. James White were consistent, I think that he would have to be an incrementalist over an abolitionist. Why? Because, hey, there's going to be all this death and destruction if we don't pass these laws that say, and then you can murder your offspring after. Hey, it could prevent some death and destruction from happening. That I think would be the consistent view. Remember that worship session at the 2024 RNC that saddened me intensely. They had a sheikh, I'm guessing to be a Muslim sheikh then, right? Offer a prayer at the RNC. And you can remember the days where I think George W. Bush, he was very, what's the word I'm looking for? Ecumenical, I guess you call it. Where, hey, every stripe, kind of like the Southern Baptist president, what's his name? Jimmy Carter was very ecumenical, very universalist kind of thing. And that'd be a discussion. Could you elect a president who's a universalist? Should you do that if you're a theonomist? Hey, that'd be interesting. And we've had universalist presidents for a long time. You can't say anyone's going to hell if you're a president. You can't do that. You lose votes over that. That's not very practical. Yeah, you know where this is going. So
let's say there's a chance of an election taking place in a matter of weeks that would actually somehow reflect a meaningful representation of the people. Because if you didn't have the constant election interference, y'all read the Facebook letter yesterday, right? Came out yesterday afternoon, where Facebook says, yeah, the Democrats asked us to do this, this, and this, and we did. We censored.
Okay, yeah, and there's still censorship this election cycle going on. How can we say that? Again, they censored the picture of Donald Trump, with his arm raised, fight, fight, fight. They took that thing down as fast as they could, and they had their explanation there. Hey, it's violent, and people might not see it, and there's blood, and so we don't want people to be victims of these bloody images here. And so you had censorship there. If the roles were reversed, and that happened to Kamala or Biden or Obama or whoever, your Democrat, it would have been plastered all over Facebook. We'd still be seeing it today. You'd see it 5 times a day on Facebook still to this day. But again, there's that corruption. There's that unequal weights and measures from Facebook out there as well. So that censorship, let's call it, actually.
Everything that you folks, you people are conspiracy, none of this ever happened. And now they're going, yeah, it did. And have you forgotten that, when Elon Musk bought Twitter and he released all those documents, they did.
Yeah, it happened. It's still happening. And yeah.
Same thing. Censorship, election interference. I mean, it's the amount of Chinese money running the media spots that I'm seeing. When I watch, I don't watch almost any television. Okay, I just don't have time to, or an interest to. But I'm a big cycling fan. And so, it's summer, and we cyclists, we get our Super Bowl for 9 weeks out of the summer. You've got the Giro d'Italia, you've got the Tour de France, and right now the Vuelta a España. 3-week-long Grand Tours. This Vuelta is incredible. Over 200,000 feet of climbing. And it's been over 100 degrees. They've literally had people, being carted off in an ambulance because of heat stroke and stuff like that. It's been rough. Anyway, man, the ads running on Peacock for certain audiences. Ruben Gallego, probably 10 ads per day of watching the thing. It's just in multiple languages, English and Spanish. Oh yeah, where'd that money come from? Let me tell you. It's got CCP written all over it. Really does. So, all that aside, let's say
we could talk a little bit about the CCP for a moment, right? So there's 2 different views going on with that. You can have the more Peter Zeihan view, who would be a geopolitical analyst out there, one of pretty well respected. And he would say that China is going through a demographic collapse here very soon. Now, why? It's because they murdered a lot of their children. They don't exist because of the one-child policy. And so because of that, you've got, I've said 100 million men who basically be single for their entire, their lives. Maybe it's not 100 million, maybe it's 50 million. It's hard to know because it's China. You don't really trust their statistics all that much, but maybe it's 60 million men who will never find a wife because why? Because the one child murder policy. And so, hey, that's going to cause some chaos and destruction over there. China would be kicking our butts so much right now, here today, if they didn't murder their offspring. They would be a superpower today that's stronger than the United States. Just book it. They would have eclipsed us already if it weren't for them murdering their offspring. And so, India, I believe, is actually more populous now than China. But Peter Zeihan would say that one, he wouldn't say it the way that I would, for sure. But he would say, hey, their demographic issues, they've got an aging population, and that is going to basically destroy China and put them back into I don't know if you'd say the dark ages, but they're as strong as they're ever going to be basically right now and in the short years to come. because of that policy. Then there are others, even if you listen to Elon Musk talk about China, who would say that what's the foundation for how powerful a nation will be when it comes to war? Well, that foundation's their economy. If you have a strong economy, then you're going to be strong when it comes to war. If you have a weak economy, weak on war. In America, for the longest time, we've had the strongest economy. I think we still do, right? When it comes to GDP and all that. Well, give it some time, and China's economy will be 2 to 3. I think he said 2 to 3 times stronger than ours, something like that. But it will overtake ours for sure. Just book it. Good for India. Yeah, 1.44 billion. It's interesting that India generally, I think, has good relations with Israel. Maybe God will use India in the future to protect Israel, especially as America, the more godless and wicked that we become. It's interesting that we tend to become more anti-Israel the more wicked that our nation becomes. That's just my perspective on it. But so if America is twice the size and we're the bully on the block, and this is a chat that Elon Musk had on China, then hey, you're just more powerful than everyone else. But what happens when a new bully who's 2 or 3 times of the economic size of America comes on the block? Well, you're going to have to adjust to a new world order, I guess you call it, a rising superpower, which will be China. And would that surprise people with their eyes open in America? No, I don't think so. I mean, the work ethic in China, you have a lot of people working 78 hours a week in China. And there's a movement in China called, what's it called, like Banling or something. I'm not Chinese. I don't know the word, but it's let it rot kind of thing, where, hey, we can't get ahead in life because of different things, so just let it rot. Very pessimistic view going on over there. And so, is the future of China, is it bright where they are the next superpower, or is it pretty dim? That's interesting. If they didn't murder their offspring, it would be very bright for sure, I think. And there would be no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So
that there's a small chance of hitting the brakes for 4 more years before Marxism topples the Constitution of the United States. How much is that worth? Here's the point. The argument that
So the situational argument is, hey, if we can elect Donald Trump, and that creates circumstances where we don't have Kamala and death and destruction for 4 years, hey, let's do it in this situation. And the theonomy side, the only elect leaders who fear God aren't corrupt and are competent men, that's been dismissed for the situational ethics thing. Could you make the same exact argument with abortion? Yes, you could. Hey, if we can use this incrementalism to prevent death and destruction of the unborn, hey, go do it. And so, just logically and rationally, Dr. James White, I think, couldn't be an abolitionist. He would have to be more of an incrementalist, I think, logically. And I have a hard time reconciling that. And I think that if he were challenged on that, he would have a hard time reconciling that. And I think he has been challenged on it and responded to it. And has there been a good response? I don't know. So, but that's my thoughts on it. And it's a discussion I think worth having for sure. Anti-Israelism seems nothing but anti-Semitic hatred for Jews as a whole. A lot of the current professing nationalist people have this tendency, in my opinion. Yeah, my view is that in the future, before Christ comes, there'll be a lot of hatred towards Christians and a lot of hatreds towards Jewish people as well, both. So every 4 years, we are asked to vote for sin in order to push off greater sin for 4 more years. What about not voting for sin and leaving it in God's hands? When do we give that a chance? Yeah. And so if the standard, And the theonomists, the Dr. James White and company, they are famous for what question by what standard, and what's the standard? The Word of God. And if they came out with a video on voting, you couldn't say by what standard. It'd have to be the situational ethics standard, and not certainly not a theonomist standard. I think just logically. Um, and hey, maybe I'm wrong, right? And I'm not even would I consider myself a theonomist? No. Maybe a schizophrenic theonomist, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, we'll keep going.
Well, we can't keep voting for these people. They'll never learn. After this one, I don't think it's going to matter. There's not going to be a 2028 election that has any actual meaningful hope of dislodging the quote unquote deep state or anything like that. Like I said, 20 years ago, it made sense because you're sort of thinking, well, we got a while to go. You know, we can hope for the best here. There's nothing to hope for the best.
Is there any hope that, Donald Trump will dislodge the deep state? No. He had 4 years to do it earlier. Again, Republican House, Senate, Supreme Court in him. He had 4 years to do it. 2 years, actually. I take that back. He had 2 years because after midterms, they lost either the House or Senate or both. But he had 2 years to do it, and he didn't do it in the two years that he had to do it. And now, if he's reelected, he'll have 4 years to do it, and he's pivoted to a more godless position. Everyone believes that. Dr. James White even believes that. So we don't really have a hope in that either,
After November 5th of this year. Is it 5th or 6th? I think it's the 5th. I think it's the 5th. There is absolutely positively no reason. Is the 5th? Yeah. I'm not even sure I'm going to be back by then. So this may be completely academic for me. But so my response to those that are saying, well, the Republicans will never learn if we don't, if we vote one way in this, if we don't vote in this election,
well, I don't think that the best articulated, argument will be the Republicans will never learn if we, don't vote third party. Certainly that is an argument that, you could make, especially since what'll be 60, 70, 80% of Republicans vote for Trump. Well, if we were united, and you remove that, they would never stand a chance of being elected without, Republicans or evangelicals, Christians voting for them. But I don't think that's the argument. The argument that should be made, I think it's a powerful argument. And it's kind of the same argument even abolitionists would make from time to time. If you know, you know. But the argument would be, hey, you won't vote for someone who's God-fearing, because hey, there's probably someone for president that's running who's God-fearing, competent, and not corrupt. Let's say, we'll just pretend. But there's someone in America who could run who meets those three qualifications for sure. But where was I going? Where was I going with this whole argument anyways? I can't even remember. Every time. We'll keep listening. That'll come back to me here in a moment.
We're gonna punish you for going the wrong direction on abortion.
Okay, yep. We're gonna punish you. Yeah. Hey, you won't elect someone who fears God. We're going to punish you. And this is talking more not just to the candidate now, which Dr. James White, when he talks about this, he's talking about the candidate. Hey, you're going to lose votes because of this. You're going to lose the election because you support abortion or whatever. You don't have the best view on it. We're going to punish the candidate. The more theonomic view, I think, would be, hey, nation, hey, voters, you won't support someone and vote for someone who fears God, isn't corrupt, and is competent, man. We're going to punish you. We're not going to vote for the wicked man over here. We're exclusively going to support men who fear God, are competent, all that good stuff. And since you wouldn't vote that way, the Marxist communist gets elected. Well, they're going to wreak death and destruction and chaos upon you. And hey, that is a punishment for you. That is judgment for you. We are willing to punish you and judge you for that by what happening, the evil person getting elected in a landslide. We're willing to do that. Why? Because you wanted to disobey God and vote for and support people who compromise and do not fear God. I think that's the best theonomic position. We could talk about a more, what would you call it? Just bare bones position that maybe John MacArthur, probably Dr. Steve Lawson would have. They would generally say, I think I've heard John MacArthur make the argument before of, hey, what do we want from the government? Someone who allows us to gather together, who will hopefully punish evildoers, hopefully, who will protect our right to preach the gospel to people. Hey, that's what we want. And we're going to vote for people who will support those things. And that's about as much as we can hope for and ask for the government, kind of thing. In other words, hey, we're gonna hope for and vote for and support politicians or leaders who will, not infringe on those rights, or who will persecute us the least and leave us alone to live our godly lives and all that. That's how we are going to vote. And it's not, our focus isn't even so much on politics. It is on living godly lives, preaching the gospel, those kind of things. That would be maybe a more mainstream view.
Okay. You may punish the Republicans, and with the result that you will never have anyone.
Okay. So, and again, the argument really shouldn't be, hey, we're going to punish Republicans that way. The argument is, hey, we're punishing all of America that way. Hey, you're going to vote for wicked people for the Republican nominee like Trump. We are going to punish you by voting for exclusively third party, someone who fears God. That doesn't line up with Trump. And so, hey, the Marxist wins, the very wicked person wins, and there is going to be chaos and destruction that happens, and that's your punishment. I think that is the argument that would be made.
To vote for in the future that will even give consideration to any kind of end of human abortion at all. The Marxists aren't going to do that. Nobody in China gets to vote to abolish abortion. That's they don't get to do that because that's Marxism. They don't get to do it in North Korea, in Cuba. They don't get to do that kind of stuff. And so I just don't see that we're in the arguments that I once went, oh yeah, that makes sense. We're not in a situation like that anymore. You're literally going. But what I would say to people is, think about it as your last vote. This could be your last vote. Because
okay, this is an interesting comment. Joe Webben said around the same lines, that we're going to punish you over bad candidates, but was highly critical of that point of view. I should go listen to more of Dr. Joel Webben on that, because again, Dr. Joel Webben, if you listen to his arguments, I have listened to his arguments in the past, they were 100% when it comes to elections, situational ethics, 0% theonomic, 0% on that. And again, that's where I just came up with the phrase, hey, Pastor Joel Webben, are you a theonomist or aren't you? Because all of the arguments that I hear from him, from you, have been exclusively over situational ethics being the foundation. None of them, zero, have been theonomy for sure. And again, it's one thing to say, hey, we're going to punish the bad candidates. Okay, well that's one person. But what about the millions of people voting for that bad candidate who, again, doesn't fear God, who is promoting wickedness and promoting breaking God's laws? However many different ways, yeah, Joel Webben is not a theonomist at all, not even remotely close. Yeah, and if we brought him in here, he would say, hey, I'm a theonomist. Okay, we'll explain that. Well, I'm a general equity theonomist, so we'll take principles from the Old Testament of God's word, and we will apply them for today. And he will be a very patriarchal, there we go, theonomist, who would say, if I understand him right, hey, only men can be leaders in government. Generally, I would think, and I think that'd be pretty fair to him. And since he's a post millennialist, I think that he would say, hey, only men who are competent, who fear God, should be leaders in society and nations. I think that's pretty fair. But again, you'd never hear that from him unless it's an ideal. Not when rubber hits the road, you wouldn't, because there's too much situational ethics when he talks about it. So at least when I hear him talk about it.
Because look, I know people in China get to vote. I know people in Russia get to vote, and they all know it's for play.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean anything. They all know that. They know who's going to win. In a Marxist country, you know who's going to win when the election starts. It's all for show.
And how far are we from having that in America? All of our major cities obviously have the most people, right? And so who lives in the major cities? Well, they're overwhelmingly Democrat. You take all of our major cities, and I think it's any state really, and they are overwhelmingly Democrat, especially our mega cities. And so in the future, or even currently, what are you going to have? There's going to be massive corruption and voter fraud within major cities, I would think, potentially. Who knows? But that will, and because the Christian worldview has been gutted out, and part of the Christian worldview again would be, hey, competence, no corruption, fearing God. Well, that's been gutted out for secular pagan humanism again. And so in the future, or even currently, hey, cheating, hey, that could be a great thing. That could be a wonderful thing. Why? Well, because if we don't cheat, then Orange Man gets elected and he is worse than the devil. And so it's actually a good thing. Hey, we're using situational ethics here, right? And it's interesting because that's what that's what the pagans do. That's what unbelievers do. That's what everyone does. Instead of, hey, we're trusting in the law of God and the sovereignty of God and these kind of things. It's human nature just to resort to situational ethics, I think.
So this could be your last non-show vote. It may already be a show vote. We may find out 15, 20 years from now that, it was just a huge hiccup, whoops, in 2016, and that everything had already been in place, and it was just a brief interruption. I don't know. But from my perspective, if there is any...
Okay, so pizza fat. You saw the video. Really, this is kind of a continuation of the video of where John Harris from Conversations That Matter, great YouTube channel, he brought on again the best. He brought on three pastors. Again, it was Pastor Joel Webben. There's Pastor, I think, Gordon, Kerry Gordon, I think. And then there was a third pastor, and they were supposed to have three different views. One of them was, hey, we're not voting for Trump. The other one was, hey, we're voting for Trump, which would be Joel Webben's view. We don't like it. It's going to make us sick, but we got to do it. And then the third pastor's view was supposed to be, hey, we're voting for Trump and we're glad, we're happy, we're excited over it. No apologies over it. But the third pastor, his view didn't come across that way, I don't think. And it'd be impossible to defend the view, I think, of, hey, we're voting for Trump and we're just getting excited over it. No apologies. It's great. And the world, it's going to save the universe. It's going to save the world. It's going to make America great again, I guess. No, that'd be impossible to defend. But could you defend Pastor Joel Webben's view of, hey, we're going to vote for Trump. Yeah, we don't like it. It'll make us sick, but we got to do it because of situational ethics. If not, then, chaos, destruction, Marxism. Again, Pastor Kerry Gordon came out with the view that, just listening from the side, hey, that's what I agree with. That's what I believe in. And he'd be, if I had to guess, an anti-theonomist, which is just very, ironic, actually, because then you have your theonomists basically being having the opposite view. But again, part of Kerry Gordon's assertion or view was, hey, he used to vote for the lesser of two evils all the time, and then he would feel absolutely horrible about it and convicted by the Spirit and just bad afterwards. And so then he was praying for a long time, seeking God, and in his view, Exodus 18, hey, we got to resort to that. And that's not just for Israel, that expands throughout the course of time, would be his argument there. Um, and so he would say it is a sin to vote for someone who doesn't vote, who does not meet those qualifications. And he would say that he is willing, just like abolitionists are willing to punish those who um, incrementalists basically, and say, hey, we're willing to punish you and that we won't support you if you vote for a bill that ends with, and then you can murder your offspring. We're not going to support you. You're going to lose power. You're going to lose your election, whatever. And that's your consequence and your punishment. Well, I think Joe Levin would actually be on board with that. Why? Because he would profess to be an abolitionist and not an incrementalist. But when it comes to voting in leaders who, hey, you don't fear God, we're not going to vote for you. We're going to punish you and everyone else because now you're going to have the wicked, godless, destructive candidate. We're going to punish you there. Well, Joel Webbin isn't consistent in that you get kind of crickets there. I don't even remember his response there. I don't think he had a response there, to be honest. So if recalling again, the Gordon Pastor view was very unpopular reaction wise, since from the commenters, they view Gordon as being a selfish, arrogant boomer. Yeah. And so if you read through the comments on that video with John Harris and Pastor Joel Webbin, I think that overwhelmingly your evangelicals and people responding to that video had Joel Webbin's view, or if not his view, they supported him and overwhelmingly criticized Pastor Gordon there. But again, you know, I just find it impossible how any theonomist would applaud and say, hey, Joel Webbin has the theonomic view there. Again, I grew up in the Assembly of God Pentecostal, and it grabbed my attention. Why? You have someone who's not a theonomist come out and embrace theonomy, basically, and then he had someone who it actually is a theonomist come out and basically dismiss theonomy, all in the same video, and no one caught it. John Harris didn't catch it. No one challenged him on it, and no one's talking about it that I see, at least, and except for me. And someone help me make sense out of this, because it does not make any sense at all, other than naturally people don't want to go through chaos, death, and destruction. That's something that anyone can get behind.
Chance at all that we could hit the brakes for just 4 more years. Who knows what's going to happen in 4 years?
Yeah. So what if incrementalism could hit the brakes? Would you support incrementalism hitting the brakes as well? Over abolitionism? That'd be a question that, that people should ask, because again, there's just an irreconcilable view going on here. I don't even know. I'm guessing that if we had asked Dr. James White, hey, are you an abolitionist or are you an incrementalist? I think he'd say abolitionist. I think. Maybe I'm wrong there.
I know for people who are still seriously seeking to get states. I mean, my own state, there's going to be this, there's going to be abortion initiative on the ballot.
Yeah, I didn't follow how much, Pastor Gordon endorsed, or, Robert DeSantis. Would DeSantis meet those 3 qualifications? Well, they passed it with Pastor Gordon. Now, when Pastor Gordon was talking about it, he in that video with John Harris, he was saying how maybe Catholics could qualify with that, or people who aren't even Christians, if I understood it right, could meet those three qualifications. And that caught my attention because I disagree with him there actually. And I don't think anyone who is a Christian could meet the fear God qualification there. So interesting. If you go watch it, people should go watch that. It's a discussion worth having for sure. And really, I want a Dr. James White or Jeff Durbin, a Pastor Joel Webbin, to reconcile directly how theonomists, how Pastor Joel Webbin, Pastor Dr. James White, explain to me, please, how can you support men who don't fear God, are not competent, and who are corrupt for being president or leaders, governors, whatever, and be a theonomist who generally would say, hey, you got to be those three things to be in, elected office. How do you reconcile that with theonomy? That deserves the explanation, really. That's the heart of the issue.
It was completely inappropriately presented. We presented evidence to judges that the law had been broken and how it was put forward. They didn't care. And so it's going to be there, and we could follow Ohio. And it's just amazing.
Could someone make the argument that an unbeliever can fear God? Could you make that argument? Could you make that argument from Scripture? Is there an instance in Scripture where an unbeliever fears God?
When you think about what's happened to Arizona, if you want to see the poison of California, look at what has happened to Arizona. Tucson, for example, is about as deep blue as what's happened to Tucson is about as deep blue as Austin, Texas. It really is, because they're university towns. It's always how that ends up working. So we could end up calling for God's wrath upon our state, because that's what you're doing. You're calling for God's wrath upon your state. And almost nobody says that anymore, by the way. It was widely believed.
And that's a good, thing to consider and to talk about when we talk about these things. Hey, your state just approved, murdering your offspring all the way up to birth. You're asking for the wrath of God. You really are. And there's been a lot more people are on an edge more. There's a lot more people who are waking up to see, hey, America's unraveling. It's coming apart at the seams. There's folks, if you watch different podcasts, who are saying, yeah, America could be within a civil war, between basically probably conservatives and liberals within X amount of years. There's people saying that. You have Elon Musk coming out a while ago saying, hey, if things keep going the way they're going in Europe, there's probably going to be a civil war in Europe, maybe in the UK or wherever, because things can't continue to go the way that they're going, and there not be just unrest and war break out, basically, as well.
For a long time, but almost no one actually believes that anymore. That the actions of the electorate and of those that they choose to lead them could actually bring God's judgment upon them as a political unit.
Hey, Nicholas, I posted an invite. If anyone wants to join the stream, you're welcome. We've been going over 2 hours. I always begin a stream thinking, hey, I have nothing to say. It'd be like if we go 10 minutes and then it goes 2, 3, 4 hours. Who knows? I left AD a comment after the RNC asking him when he is going to be consistent with his desire to church discipline Democrats, by now also insisting the same for Republicans. Yeah, that's interesting for sure. And again, I've said this before, I think every single Democrat that's running for office should be under church discipline, and they should be denied communion as well. And do we say that all with, what would you call it, just angrily and full of wrath? No, the loving thing to do, if your church cares about that person then the loving, compassionate thing to do is, hey, we don't get how you can support all this godlessness going on. And we care about your soul. We care about your eternal state. Hey, what's going on here? We really care and we love you. And we want what's best for you. But when you are supporting things that God hates, it is, we're just concerned here. What's going on, kind of thing. And same thing with Republicans as well. That was about 4 weeks ago, and AD has not done a video yet since then. Yeah, uh, I noticed that a while ago. I haven't been watching a lot of videos from our, what would you call it? Our gang, our Avengers, I guess we used to call ourselves. I should go and just check and see what everyone's up to. Uh, yeah, you're not set up right now. You're probably out doing this or that. Yeah, I got you. Maybe one of these days we could do a conversation on it, Nicholas. I really want to. Someone find a theonomist. They keep retreating and running away. They're all defeated. We could never talk to Mark Ryan about this voting for Trump thing. We'll just run away and raise the white flag. That's probably what's going on here. Pastor Joel Webben strikes me as someone who'd be very easy to talk to, I think. I would love to talk to Pastor Joel Webben about this. If there were anyone to talk to, I mean, Pastor Joel Webben, John Harris would be great to talk about this. Who else? Maybe Rick Caldwell. We could talk to him about this. He's not a theonomist, and I don't know that he could put together, but he recognized though how they are not functioning as a theonomist, how Joel Webben and company aren't functioning as a theonomist, and how you have your non-denominational pastor who is not reformed functioning as a theonomist. He recognized that, so he could get some insights into that. But I want a passionate theonomist to say, no, because of theonomy, we must vote for Trump. I think they're extinct. I don't think they exist. I haven't been able to find any. I haven't searched that hard. Maybe they're out there. But someone, find me one. And the problem is Pastor Joel Webben, James White, they will never watch this video. Why? It's 2.5 hours or more long. Who would waste their life watching it if you're them? They never would. And so maybe someone should take a clip and put it on X, tag them, say, hey, what's going on here? Bring out the theonomy. And again, Jethro and Moses, when we get to that, it's a narrative. And so maybe you could weasel your way out and say, hey, it's a narrative. It's not didactic. It's not instructional. God isn't giving instructions to Moses to do this. It's Jethro, and it's a narrative. And maybe theonomists could just dismiss, having leaders who fear God, aren't corrupt, and who are competent men. Maybe theonomists could just dismiss it that way, saying, hey, it's just a narrative, and it's not a command from God. It's from Jethro to Moses. Maybe that's their easiest way to weasel themselves out of this. But again, the men component, a lot of them are more patriarchal, a lot more emphasis on men being in leadership. And so for them, I think that they would have to cringe as they are saying, hey, doesn't matter if, to have competent men in leadership and government here nowadays. That opens the door to saying, hey, it could be men or women. Yeah.
I don't think the vast majority of Christians even believe that anymore. It's sort of hard to speak prophetically to a people when you don't really believe. And not only that, there is also the short-term problem. You see, cultures that will outlast ours think long-term. We think short-term. This was not initially.
Wait a second. Now, did David French get kicked out of his church? I don't think he did. I wouldn't think that he'd go to an actual church, though. I don't know. Look at this. Hey, Caldwell may be a little more frosty towards Webben, as K-Dub, who seems to be a friend to Caldwell, was attacked on Twitter over the Aristotle comment. Apparently, I glimpsed a small portion of that. I'm finally on X. One more time. Let me put my what would you call it? Twitter. Do you call that a Twitter handle or Twitter name or whatever? I'm old. I'm a boomer when it comes to Twitter. Oh, wait. It's not Montana. No, that's wrong. It is Mark Ryan King, because there wasn't enough letters for Viking there. And I guess being a king's better anyways. And if you have a beard, you're pretty much a king as it is. So, and hey, I'm so glad that my beardless days are over. It's been 9 months and a week that I've had this beard now, that we've been in a nice relationship with each other since going clean shaven. So there is that. Hey Nick, how's your beard going? I need to go check out your channel here and see what you've been up to. Cause you could have shaved and I couldn't have told you. I think he remains rather biblically objective on the matter, my assessment anyway. Yeah. And so again, if you're not a theonomist, what's the argument that you're going to make? One of the basic arguments that a person who isn't a theonomist would make is, when it comes to the Great Commission, who is that instruction given to? Again, hey, go preach the gospel to all creation, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, instructing them to obey all that I have commanded you. And the part that we'd have to zero in on is the instructing them to, or teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you. So your people who aren't theonomists would say, hey, what's the word for folks who aren't theonomists? What's the theological name for them? They have to have a name, right? But they would say that the phrase instructing them to obey all that I have commanded you, that is exclusively given to Christians. Is that given to unbelievers? No, just believers exclusively. And so you can't expect that to apply to unbelievers. Why? Hey, they're unregenerate. They can't obey God's instructions anyways. And so that Great Commission is, instructed to believers. Hey, is that a good argument? Is it a powerful argument? And by the way, hey, they're right on that. That instruction is exclusively to believers, that when it comes to the Great Commission. I would agree with them there. Logically, the pushback that I have on that, and where I would want some clarity, is that during the great white throne judgment, Jesus Christ will judge every unbeliever. Hey, for what? For disobeying what Christ has commanded them. And so they're not off the hook. And so, help me out with that, by the way, because I don't see how, yes, the Great Commission is only given to believers exclusively, but you still can't get yourself out of that logically, I think, because again, great white throne judgment, every hey, you disobeyed Christ here, and here. Every sin in the universe punished for unbelievers, in the history of the universe punished, because God will not turn a blind eye towards any sin in the history of the universe. And so every command that they disobeyed from Christ is still accounted for. And how? In hell forever. When you get down to the bottom of it, which is a terrifying thing. The MSNBC video with David French stating he got canceled from his church. Yeah, he should. Oh, whoa. Yeah. And the more liberal churches, or churches that are going the more, I guess, seeker sensitive route, I think the seeker sensitive movement, if I had to guess, has really gutted church discipline from the churches. And then there's a downgrade even further from your seeker sensitive church, which does what? Where you can have basically your liberal Democrats who support godless things. Hey, we don't even exercise church discipline, and now they can be members of the church, and we're not going to exercise, again, loving, compassionate. Hey, we love you. We're concerned about you. And at the end of the day, hey, this isn't just you're supporting things God hates. We care about your soul, and we love you, and we want what's best for you. Hey, your life, we're going to judge you by the standard of not situational ethics, like what Joel Webben likes so much, but we're going to judge you by the standard of God's word. And God's spoken on this. He's spoken clearly. God is an expert communicator. No one communicates better than God. He's spoken on this. You shall not murder. You shall not do XYZ thing. And hey, your life isn't adding up here. What's going on here? We're concerned about your soul here. I watched David French once. I thought, this is so bad that this man is an embarrassment to his father. Yeah. Whew. And when you get to your more woke folks, Phil Vischer and company, and I know folks personally who have went down that road and been influenced by, Phil Vischer in the, kind of that more progressive Christianity, I guess you call it. We could talk a lot about that. We could talk about VeggieTales all day, but we won't go there.
Necessarily a problem with the Constitution, the American system, but it has become a problem. We think very short term. Societies that think long term and plan long term will outlast those that think short term. And that's where we are. We are people now filled. You see them on social media. These self-centered, childish adults. They think about no one but themselves. They don't think about their culture. They don't think about their nation. They don't think about the church if they call themselves a Christian. All they think about is their retirement, and if everything falls apart after I'm dead, who cares? Because most of them don't want to have a family. And you would think that eventually that would mean they would all disappear. Well, it's not working out quite that way. Sadly, people come here from other countries, even illegally, and even though they might bring a actually higher level of morality in some ways, especially from many of the Hispanic countries, they get infected by the self-centeredness of the American experience today. And so we don't even think about our voting in that way. We just think about it personally rather than long term. And so can you imagine how different things would?
And we've been talking about the judgment of God a little bit, and I saw on Twitter today how a Venezuela gang had taken over a block, it sounds like, an apartment complex and perhaps a block in Colorado. I think it's Aurora, Colorado, or maybe close to Denver or something. But how that is going on right now in Colorado. And hey, it could spread. You got at least 10 million folks coming through that southern border. And, Dr. James White is calling that other party, hey, it's the party of death, right? And he's really onto something there. We could have terrorists and just a lot of chaos coming out of from that southern border. And you have your intelligence agencies coming out saying, hey, there's someone from Al Qaeda or from XYZ and they're here. Well, how did they get here? Through the southern borders wide open until elections come, and then they have to pretend to care about it, and that's part of the corruption that's going on here. Hey, we're corrupt. Oh, there's this problem. We're not just going to close our eyes and pretend that it doesn't exist and really add to it. We're going to go fix it for you because elections are coming down. But then the second that elections are over because of that corruption, we're going to continue with the agenda for sure. But we can see how, we could wake up one day and we just don't know that we're going to have the peace and stability, relatively speaking, I guess, that we've enjoyed for, our lives. We could wake up tomorrow and it could be radically different tomorrow than it was a week ago.
Would be if we still had the way of voting that was envisioned by the founders. I mean, none of this would be happening. Can you imagine?
That leads to another tweet by Dr. James White. He had a tweet, and I should have, if this were a professional channel, I'd be ready and I'd have it right now for you, but it's not a professional channel for sure. I should look it up though, because it was very interesting. Let me try to find it. Whitebeard, right? You would think that I would have it already. But he was making a post on who am I following? I am following him. Perfect. On who should be able to vote and how we've really botched it, how we've messed it up. And where is it? Let me try to find it here. It wasn't too long ago. It was maybe what 2-3 days ago. This is a good reminder. No, he also another thing that he was talking about that grabbed my attention was the Crusades, because uh, hey, why? I'm hardly on X and hardly read the exchanges that go on there, but why? If I had to guess, you probably have more of your theonomic post-mill brothers saying, "Hey, the Crusades, those were a wonderful thing." Well, Pastor James White is giving some pushback on that. And he was saying, okay, for the folks who are still going on, what on earth? The Crusades did not stop the expansion of Islam. In fact, they were not intended to. That was done the old fashioned way, armies representing nations fighting against other nations. But then he went on to say that the Crusades were definitely religious in nature. Um, I know Rome was quite involved in politics and the like by that time and very corrupt, no question about it. But here's the point: they joined religion to their avarice and thirst for power. They promised eternal life to those who died fighting the infidel. The entire foundation was a fundamental and outright denial of the nature, efficacy, and truth about the gospel of Jesus Christ. Hey, if you fight in these crusades, then you're going to have eternal life. And so it's a denial of the sufficiency of the Lord Jesus Christ's work upon the cross. That was interesting. And that was a very, very good thought on that, too, actually. It kind of was like, okay, that was an insight I'd never thought of before, actually. But then he had a post on voting, and I'm trying to find it. And again, not a professional channel. I will let him talk some more while I'll try to find that tweet then.
Imagine if we had paper ballots only on election day, one vote per land owning citizen. There wouldn't be a Democrat left. There wouldn't be, because their power has come from promising to take other people's wealth and give it away. We've gone well past the tipping point. I've spoken about this for years. For years, I've said there's a tipping point where you get to a point where there are more people wanting everybody else's money than there are people who have money. And once you get over that, it's a matter of time. That's why we're $35 trillion in debt. And can barely service the interest on the debt, let alone start paying the debt down. It's all going to come apart. It's going to fall apart. And if you have people like Kamala Harris with her rent controls and food controls, all the standard Marxist tripe, it'll come down a whole lot faster. You're talking El Depressiono, very, very fasto.
But yeah, he was posting earlier, kind of the same thing that he posted on here, that if we had, if we still had it to where you had to be a landowner and basically be a household led by, again, by a man, by a husband or whoever, to vote, and it'd be the household, but things wouldn't have deteriorated nearly as fast as is the argument, the insight, and a conversation worth having. If you were to have that conversation today in our public schools, you'd probably be laughed out of the room. Say, hey, only landowners should be able to vote. You'd probably be laughed out of this public school. You'd probably be laughed off social media, laughed off a lot of things for sure, as well. And then if you had, hey, it should be the head of household. So the household, the head of household, and stuff casting that vote, you'd be laughed out even more for sure.
With someone like her. So my thought to my fellow believers, I know a number of you, your dear brothers and sisters, and you said, never gonna do it. I can't vote for anyone who is pro-abortion. Now, no matter what I have seen some people trying to say that Donald Trump is as pro-abortion as Kamala Harris. Come on. He's not. I don't think he was ever overly, in a meaningful fashion, pro-life. I think it's always been a political thing for him. It's a New York thing. But Kamala Harris is the celebrated servant of Planned Parenthood. I mean, wow. I mean, I've just never seen anybody so completely sold out worldview-wise to Planned Parenthood and the culture of death as Kamala Harris. So let's.
Yeah, so you can't just say that they're equivalent. We could say they're equivalent in that, hey, neither of them fear God. They're equivalent that way, but one of them, if we had the unbiblical view that, hey, sin is sin and everything's equal that way, and so Trump is equally as bad as Harris, that wouldn't be a good view as well. Let me respond to this comment. Can't help but suspect that the current so-called nationalistic movement, be it religious or racial, is a honeypot psyop to lure dissident youngsters angry at the government, aka going red pilled. Yeah, eventually I think that the Marxists they'll shift from, and when do they really thrive? It's when they have an adversary to go after. Hey, there's this other person, Trump, and he's worse than the devil, and it fires up the Marxist machine to really to really get people heated up and join their movement, join their cause. And so, when Trump went away for a while, it was really boring. I was yawning. There's nothing to talk about. And you could feel that. CNN and the Democrats really missed that firing rod, that spark that is Donald Trump, to get everyone lockstep and passionate with their cause and everything, for sure. But eventually, what we'll see, in my opinion, they will redirect that from, hey, it's not just Trump, it's all of his followers. It's all those probably Christian nationalists that are out there. And they'll probably aim their ire, their ammunition or whatever you want to call it, at Christian nationalists next. That's who they will come for. I think first I'll be one of them. You go for the low hanging fruit first. And of course, you don't use your equal weights and measures. That's not a thing they don't have the Christian worldview. And the Christian worldview has that's exclusive to the Christian worldview. And they don't have it, so they're not capable of having equal weights and measures unless maybe by the grace of God. And so they'll come after whatever group that they want to come after, and logically, who will be first? Probably the Christian nationalists, and logically, the theonomists, I think, and the post millennials, I would think. And part of that, might make me jealous a little bit. Why? Because the wicked, godless people, who are they coming for first? For them, is it because they're the most biblical and darkness hates the brightest light? I don't know. Who knows at the end of the day? But if you have them standing up and saying, hey, none of you should be in office, none of you are qualified, none of you fear God, then that'd be one thing. But it is also true, the quickest way to be ignored by the Christian nationalist movement is to bring up the gospel. Yeah, if it's mainstream, I'd agree with you there. And their movement, a danger of it could be, hey, a neglect of the gospel. And I say that, and I also believe it, in that there can be the attitude of, hey, the gospel, well, that's just the ABCs. That's just the elementary things. We need to get beyond that into all that theonomy stuff, and deeper Christianity. So, keep going.
At least try to chill out enough to go extremely disappointed with Trump, extremely disappointed with Vance coming out, doing that interview. Hey, at least they do interviews, and saying, he'd veto an abortion ban. What abortion ban? There would have to be a massive swing in both the House and the Senate to have any kind of abortion ban.
Yeah, and that's a good point. In reality, who will at first it's just Doug Wilson. He's the Christian nationalist, but eventually it will be, oh, hey, there's these people out here who they want to end gay marriage. They want to criminalize abortion. They want Christian laws. They want to oppress people with their Christian laws and stuff. Well, they're a danger kind of thing. And they'll come after them as well. So
That's we've got a whole lot more work to do before anything like that can happen by a long shot. So I don't even get any of that stuff. But let's just be honest. Trump's a compromiser.
But let me respond to this. If Trump is as bad as Harris, it's because it is a cellular vehicle of corruption. And honestly, if we were to be honest or objective or have a really good conversation about it, it should be over. Hey, there's three branches of government: judicial, legislative, and executive. And we do not want Democrats to get all three branches of power, period. Why? Because with the Equality Act, hey, you could criminalize essentially Christianity overnight. You could force Christians to where they cannot be a teacher, they cannot be an XYZ, occupation person, and hold that occupation while being a Christian. Why? Because then they have to disobey God essentially with their godless, wicked Equality Act stuff that goes against the law of God. That is probably the, could you call it the worst thing, the most judgment that could happen, where people, could you call it the most judgment thing to happen? The most purifying, you could call it the most purifying thing to happen, where now you have all of the cultural Christians who are not Christians. Well, they got to make a choice, and they'll say, hey, I'm not going to make any sacrifices. I'm going to disobey God because Caesar has spoken. But then you'll have other Christians who will rise up and say, no, we must obey God rather than these Marxists. And so with Pastor James White and Pastor Joel Webben as well, purity is not part of their position that they have, I think, or purification, that kind of thing. Well, hey, we're going to punish you. And how are we going to do that? We're not going to vote for Trump. We're going to vote third party. And what's going to happen out of it is you're going to have a wicked Kamala Harris. And honestly, then you'd have a wicked Senate and a wicked House of Representatives as well. And what's going to happen is there is going to be a purification that comes out of this. And so if you are part of this very cultural Christianity who's far from God, who does not know God, well, now you got to make a choice. And there's going to be a purification that comes out of this. And you can't be on the fence anymore. You cannot be neutral. There's no neutral with God, because Jesus Christ said, he who is not for me is against me. And so stop trying to play this middle ground. Stop trying to be on the fence. Are you for Christ or are you against Christ? Are you going to love God and obey his commandments, or are you going to disobey God and obey the Marxists? That would be another. And honestly, I haven't heard people talk about that aspect of it. Hey, God purifying, his church or a nation, that's a good thing as well. And should you be scared of that, purification? Well, you're going to go through financial, situation, maybe bankruptcy, maybe, financial persecution. You could go to jail, these kind of things. And right now we're talking about a lot of the, what would you call it? But eventually it'll be jail. And it'll actually be a shocking and real conversation as well. But before it's jail, it's going to be, hey, those Christians, they lost their job because they wouldn't obey these wicked laws and rules that come out. So first there'll be financial, what would you call it? Oblivion that Christians face. In that sacrifice, hey, God is more important than money, and we're going to obey God and lose money rather than cave. That'll be the first decision to make, and then uh, darkness still hates the light. They still won't leave you alone. And so, what's after that? That's a thought as well. So,
Harris is a zealot. And so, who do you want making the appointments to key positions the next 4 years? We've already seen what the Biden regime has been.
And then again, hey, maybe again, 33% chance or so Republicans win the House, the Senate, the presidency. And it's very unlikely with Democrats this cycle, unless, who knows what they could do to cheat to win it. But if Republicans win the House, the Senate, the presidency, which they could, are they going to make all these reforms and all these changes that now, oh, yes, we're saying, no, they're not. They are going to, what would be a good picture of it? It's like the Charlie Brown football kick. They're going to fall on their butt and nothing good is going to come out of it. And it's just going to prove that ultimately, hey, only Jesus Christ is capable of ushering in this millennial reign. Only he can do it. And post millennials are wrong, in my opinion. And you won't find that there are people that the globe is capable of what would you call of doing this thing that we've been talking about, of getting God-fearing leaders who are competent, who do not accept bribes, those kind of things. The world is not only Jesus Christ meets that criteria, him exclusively, and he will return and he will have a millennial reign where you have that, I believe. So,
and like the damage that's been done to the fabric, morality, ethics of this nation by the Biden regime may not be reparable. It may not be. I mean, if God gave us lots of time, protect us from our enemies, change a whole lot of hearts, sure, God can do anything. But it seems to me that at this time, if we will step back and recognize the danger of this moment.
And part of it, I've heard it voiced even on CNN, where there was a gal, not surprising, who would say, "Hey, if you believe that you are endowed with certain unalienable rights from your creator, not word for word, out of would that be the Declaration of Independence? You're a Christian nationalist, that kind of thing." Under their worldview, where do rights come from? It comes from the government. It comes from those who are in power, and not from God. And eventually, hey, you believe there's these rights that cannot be infringed upon, and you have to obey God rather than them. Well, we're coming for you. We're gonna get you because hey, we're the new God in town, and you got to obey us rather than God. So.
And the impact that the continuation of the Biden regime, now under Kamala Harris, because they're trying to make it look like Trump's the incumbent and she's the brilliant newbie, when it's the exact opposite. It's astonishing how many people, I know people call themselves Christians that are buying into all of this, and I just stare at them going, how can you be so naive?
But in the comment section, how much destruction can 4 years of a Democrat president wreak upon us if they don't have the House and the Senate? Or if they don't have the Senate, basically, because maybe they win the House, but they will not win the Senate. I don't think it's highly unlikely they win the Senate. How much destruction can they do if they don't have the Senate? Not much. That's the dam that has to burst in order for things to deteriorate at an exponential level, is if they get the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Once that happens, we will see the revolution like never before. We really will. And so personally, I'm not that afraid until they have those three things of power. But once they do have those three things of power, branches of, well, we're not talking branches because they don't have the Supreme Court, but they could pack it. But once they have the House, the Senate, the presidency, then, God's sovereign, but then you should be sweating because, hey, now the judgment, the Equality Act again. I mean, now the persecution comes, and the day that happens, that is a new. That's what I would say. Dr. James White and I would probably disagree, or if we talked about, it'd be very fun to talk with him. Love to chat with Dr. James White. But I would put the death of America, or maybe this age, maybe 2016, or maybe probably more, the year that Democrats take the House, the presidency, and the Senate. And maybe you'd have to put an asterisk there because they'd have to pack the Supreme Court. They'd have to take the Supreme Court as well. But they could radically change everything if they don't even need the Supreme Court right now. And actually, if they pack the Supreme Court, I mean, which they could do with the House, the Senate, and the presidency, I mean, that's all that they need. And so the death of America, as we know, is when Democrats get those three things. And I don't think it will happen this election cycle. I happen to think that Republicans will do well this election cycle. There'll be a crisis. Then 2028, Democrats will get the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and then start packing your bags. Then start, the what would you call it, the Noah talks, or the dispensational, pessimism, if you want to call it that, because then the persecution's coming. Then the revolution of radically changing America, and it's changed a lot since 2016. But when they have those three, then it's the new era begins.
There just seems to be a spirit of stupor, of deception. It makes me very concerned. God said this nation is going into judgment, and it's going to happen. I would like to think otherwise. Has nothing to do with eschatology, by the way, but I'd like to think otherwise. So, to my dear brothers and sisters, I don't agree with you because of the time that it is. I don't agree with you.
You don't agree with the other theonomists, really. Why? Because of the situation. And part of the situation is the time and all that. It's not because of the theonomy, that, hey, who should we have in leadership? Men who fear God, are competent and not corrupt. It's because of the time, the situation.
Because we are literally, for the first time in our lives, openly facing the possible election of Marxists to the highest offices of the land. And I know what Marxism is. Yes, I'm one of those greatly derided and disliked boomers, which means I remember the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union isn't just something a lot of the younger generations don't read books about things like this, but you read about it in a history book. We lived through that. And they were the axis of evil, as was said by some of our presidents. So that's what we're facing. And in that context, voting now might give you an opportunity to vote again in 4 years. It might give you 4 years to change people's minds. It might give you 4 years to regularly contact your representatives and move them toward an understanding of what equal protection is. But if you don't vote, you are basically saying, let's just get to it. Let's just get to the Marxism. And that just means all limitations will be pulled. They won't just reestablish Roe v. Wade in law. They will go way beyond Roe v. Wade, as we've seen, as they want to do here in Arizona, as they've done in Ohio, as they did in Minnesota. Once these people get power, they make Roe look like a conservative document. And it just seems to me, at this point in history.
And people ought to think, use their brains. How is what Dr. James White is suggesting or asserting, how is that true? Well, I'm not very optimistic, because today, youth, all they care about is, hey, let's get on our phone, play some games, let's be entertained. We're not going to think about these deeper things. And, when society, collapses or starts falling apart, deteriorating insanely fast, then they'll be forced to think about those things. and that will be a good thing for them. Hey, they can stop being entertained all day watching TV or being on their phone or whatever, and they can think about the greater things in life. That will be you could say judgment or also a grace of God for them as well. Because right now, for a lot of youth, for a lot of guys, hey, uh, how am I going to spend my time? Entertainment. That's all that matters, and that's part of why we're in the mess that we are in right now too.
If you don't take a stand and say, no, give us more time to fight, give us more time to educate, pray, do something, it's like, oh, let's capitulate now. It's done. Let's let the whole thing burn down. And there are a lot of people, that's where they are. Let's just let the whole thing burn down. And it may.
Is that where I'm at? If Kamala Harris is elected, the day she's elected, I'll probably post two things. Probably when God wants to judge a nation, he gives them wicked leaders from John Calvin. But then I'll also post, what was the other thing? Skillet song, burn it down. Because that's kind of my mentality. Oh, whoa. A lot of just no faith in the youth that are growing up today, as well. And when there is judgment and chaos and calamity that comes out of the Kamala Harris administration, and they suffer the most out of it, hey, you brought destruction upon yourself. You dug uh, a what would you call it? A pit for righteous people or for other people to fall into, and you fell into your own pit because that is going to devastate them more than than anyone else, really.
It may. You can't. This is a nation divided, and someone really smart said, "Divided nations cannot stand. A house divided against itself will fall." And when I look around my own neighborhood, my own city, my own state, there's two nations in one border. And I don't know how long.
Yeah, and that's a fair observation. An observation would be, hey, if Trump is elected, yeah, there's more free speech, less censorship. There'll be less lawfare against Christians for sure, or against innocent people. There'll be less weaponization of our government against innocent people. And that's a good thing. Why? Because we want a government that, an argument that someone could make is, hey, what's the function of the government? It is to punish evildoers and to punish evildoers and reward those who do good, praise those who do good. And so Kamala Harris's government, what would they do? What would she do? Well, she would, murder the innocent, essentially the unborn, and reward the evil. Hey, you burn down Minnesota. Hey, you get a promotion. That was Tim Walz's policy essentially over there, and we're going to bail you out for doing it. And so Marxism, it flips biblical government on its head. Hey, we're going to reward evildoers and punish the innocent. Under Trump, what's going to happen? It's not going to be perfect. And no one's, hey, no one's Jesus Christ. But we're going to have a government that generally kind of does a better job, at least, of punishing evildoers and rewarding the righteous. That will happen under a Trump administration, you could argue, and it seems like fairly obvious to me that that's a good argument. Hey, that is an argument that someone could make. Would I be comfortable making that argument? Well, what about an argument from all of Scripture? Are you going to leave Exodus 18 out of a totality Scripture view on it? You could argue for that. But maybe someone who's not a theonomist could just make that argument and leave it there. So, and that would basically be an argument that Pastor John MacArthur would make, I think. And it's it's worthy of consideration, at least.
How long that can last. I really don't. It's like we built something really, really good. People want to be a part of it. But they don't realize what's necessary to keep it. But for now, it's still holding together. Once it starts coming apart, I don't know what's going to happen. I really, really don't. So that's where I'm coming from personally. Doug Wilson did a blog and May blog. I think it was today or yesterday. I didn't get to listen to all of it, but I heard enough of it that basically he was saying what I just said, probably with significantly bigger words.
And I should go listen to that or read it. I think that's Blog and May blog. I think that's on YouTube too. I should go listen to that, see if I agree or disagree with that. I mean, because Doug Wilson, I mean, it would be interesting. Maybe he would have more of a framework that just isn't situational ethics, because again, that's all that I've seen from Dr. James White and Pastor Joe Webben on it, exclusively zero theonomy, and saying, hey, why does theonomy not apply here? Or Exodus 18 not apply here whatsoever? I should go check that out. Maybe that'll be the next video. But what will I probably? Ooh, my phone's almost dead. So I started this live stream thinking, man, we can't do 2 hours this time because last time it was 2 hours. We're at 3 hours. So that's just wonderful, right? But we need to just draw this to an end. I haven't even made it through, his video on this issue. So we'll bring it to an end here soon.
He likes to get the thesaurus out once in a while and just throw a few zingers in there for the fun of it, make us all feel stupid. But I think he was pretty much saying the same thing. He said he's going to vote for a particular candidate, and when he walks out of the voting booth, he's not going to have any feelings of guilt or anything along the lines. And here's
let me read this. So this is good. From seeing the Christian nationalist arguments, they tend to quote a lot of the Old Testament, various chapters in Romans, the lesser magistrate doctrine as valid reasons for going full aggression. There is the doctrine of the lesser magistrate, and I think that's a book. It might be a book, but there's someone from, I think, Wisconsin who talked to John Harris about it years and years ago on John Harris's channel, and is a very interesting discussion, very worthwhile. And the doctrine just summed up how I would put it in layman's terms is if a governor or president, whoever comes out with a wicked law, wicked decree, those who are under that person, it's not that they can disobey them, they must disobey them. And so during all the COVID nonsense, we had a lot of sheriffs come out across the state of Montana, and the sheriff said, hey, we are not going to enforce any of those wicked lawless decrees. And so that would be the doctrine of the lesser magistrate in action. Hey, if there's a bad decree or whatever in whatever town, whatever county, whatever place, we're not enforcing it whatsoever. And so, hey, is that good? Well, if we did a logical exercise of saying, hey, the governor comes out tomorrow and says, hey, anyone who is 10 years old or 10-year-old or less should be just killed. It would be, under this doctrine, it would be the duty, the obligation of every mayor, sheriff, every person, every magistrate that's under the governor to say, hey, no, that's a wicked lawless decree. Not only can we refuse to obey you, we must disobey you here. And so if people follow this doctrine, what do you have? You can't have communism, you can't have Marxism, you can't have socialism. Why? People obey God rather than that wicked leader. And so there is that. How could you take that to an extreme degree, or logical even degree? Well, hey, the ultimate law is the law of God, and you have this magistrate who's wicked and evil and basically deserves to be overthrown. Logically is maybe where you could take it. That's not a big stretch, right? It's been nice respite to hear some faithful Christian commentary on this matter. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, You know, and is my commentary on this very popular? No. Is it very common? No, it really isn't. And part of what I wrestle through is, hey, I live in Montana and we're in a bubble. We're still uncivilized. We still ride horses to McDonald's drive through over here in my hometown. And so, hey, we're not a battleground state. You vote, you go vote third party. Trump will win Montana, no problem. Um, would it be a different story if I say I cast the deciding vote or we were a battleground state? And if you didn't vote for that person who doesn't fear God, but the other alternative, they're just mind-blowingly wicked and evil, well, then there'd be a lot more thinking to do. And at the end of the day, I almost think, hey, am I a theonomist or not? Am I happy with just leaving it at, hey, what's the role of government? To punish evildoers and praise the righteous? This one party um, will not fulfill it to a large extent, and the other party um, will kind of do it, sort of. Hey, we'll vote for the lesser one there, maybe, and I think that's a weasel way out, to be honest. I do, but it's worthy of consideration at least. Um, that's what makes the American War for Independence and non-revolution. Yeah, and that gets into, Dr. James White is someone who would say that, hey, revolutions and overthrowing the government, or if you want to call it that, that could be necessary. That could be biblical from time to time. I've heard him voice in times past, hey, there's times where a family or a husband and wife biblically that can be dissolved, and there's times where a wicked government can be dissolved as well. And hey, that sounds kind of consistent. There's a lot more details to think of, for sure, but try to finish this, but my voice is even almost shot, so
That's why, and basically said what I said. But I think I'm emphasizing a little bit more the fact that we live, the terms don't overuse, but in a day where this, in my opinion, if it goes a certain direction, will be the last even possible free election that we will face. And have I known that's a possibility for a while? Yes, I just didn't think it would happen this fast. I did not think it could happen this fast, but it has, and that's where we are. So yeah. Someone, Apologia Studios just posted my sermon from Sunday. If any of you would like to hear a sermon on justification by faith, I started in Galatians, popped over to Romans, and it's up on the web now. And we're doing a core doctrine series, and so that's where we are in our documents. And so I did that. And then the kind lady who used to sort of run things at the seminary, and the only reason I didn't list it was because it was just so.
Okay, so he might be done there. I think he'll return to the topic and then move on to the next thing. But yeah, last comments, last thoughts, and then we'll move on for the day. We'll call it a day. Well, as non-American opinion, again, your elections unfortunately have very far-reaching consequences economically and culturally wise, be it for the good or for bad. Interesting comment. I never really think through how having, Kamala versus Harris really impacts different nations, for good or bad. I'm guessing generally, hey, Trump gets elected, that's for better. Kamala gets elected, that's for worse. It'd be interesting to hear folks from different nations explain how one is a lot better than the other. I know that right now, hey, Americans, we're going through inflation, but there's something called in economics the dollar milkshake theory, which is very interesting. And basically, what are we doing? We're using our straw to suck up the wealth of other nations right now, and so other nations are being a lot more devastated by the United States by inflation than we are. In fact, the United States, the dollar has been the world reserve currency since about World War II, so about 80 years or so, 80, 90 years, something like that. In 80 or 90 years for your currency to be stable, for that long is very unique. It's very American, very unique. It is not a common thing. It's vastly uncommon. Other nations, their dollar, their money is inflated and devalued and diluted and basically destroyed or debased, we could say, insane at an insanely higher rate than the American currency. Uh, Ask Zimbabwe, ask Venezuela, ask even a lot of Argentina, ask a lot of your other nations. And inflation is a lot more of a concern over there. They've been there, they've done that. And when there is a lot of money printing, what happens? War. We'll have lots of war. We'll have a lot of unrest here. And is Kamala going to stop the money printing? No, they're going to ramp it up. Hey, $25,000 for everyone who's a first-time home buyer. Ramp up that money machine. Well, is Trump going to stop the money printing? No, he's not going to cut Social Security benefits, entitlements, that kind of stuff. In fact, what is he going to do? He's going to ramp up the money printer. He'll spend more than the Biden administration. Just book it that for sure. If he is elected, well, what's going to happen there? We'll have more inflation. The second biggest expense for Americans right now is for a country is the interest on the debt, the national debt. And so, what is America going through right now? We are debasing and diluting and devaluing and destroying the dollar. And so, what happens is there's going to be a lot of money printing. You almost can't have a recession. Why? Because America needs the taxes for from the stock market, for capital gains tax and all that. And if you have a recession, then that can destroy you a lot faster even than just the money printing, which is very, very fascinating. But that makes sense. If the stock market were to collapse, which is kind of what we need to do, is we need to spend less and rein in our spending. Well, if we were to do that, it's very interesting in that you'd have to go through hurt. It's like giving up alcohol or something. It's gonna be very tough at first. But you know, the alternative is you drink yourself, you get your hangover, but you get your high first, right? Um, but with that comparison, what is America going to do? We're going to print off a ton of money. We're going to debase and devalue, destroy the dollar. And really, if you had to put a date when this started, 2008 would really be the date, but it's escalated really dramatically since COVID. But uh, and then what happens there? You're going to get tons of war coming out of that. Historically, that's what you get out of money printing. Um, the dollar hasn't been the world currency forever. It's been what, the sterling. The UK's had it. I think the Dutch has had it for a while. I think other nations have had the world's uh, trade currency or reserve currency, I should say. And we're transitioning where soon it will not be the dollar. You hear your BRICS nations coming out, and they are working on their own currency. Who knows what it'll be? It'll probably be a cryptocurrency is probably what it'll be. The future is crypto. The future is not cash. It's not the American dollar for sure. And if I keep chatting about it, we'll never stop talking about it. But yeah, that's interesting. It makes sense. And when you have all this money printing, then you are basically enslaving your people and your nation. You're basically confiscating their wealth. And so what happens is that you're creating a bunch of angry people. And when you have a bunch of angry people, what are you going to have? A bunch of chaos and a revolution, and you could have wars. A lot of times you need someone hey, it's not our fault. It's someone else's fault. You need someone to blame it on. So you could blame it on Russia, blame it on China. You got to find someone to blame it on. And so, your money printing is accompanied with a lot of with war, with bloodshed, actually. And so there's that to consider as well. that is really, it's right around the corner, and it's very, I guess, predictable as well for people who study it. Go look up the fourth turning sometime if you're interested in something like that. Japan and Korea are two of the biggest examples of this American turf form culture. I don't get that last part. But yeah, we can talk about that in a bit. But with that, hey, thanks for joining, everyone. We're gonna call it a day, 3 hours, 20 minutes. Take a moment, hit the like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. Go check me out on X. And with that, we'll see you in the next live stream.